guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military industrial complex.
In my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in. You kind of catapult the propaganda. You kind of catapult the propaganda. Propaganda, 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 propaganda.
What's up, everybody? We are live. I think we're good to go now. Sorry about that, guys. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. For people who are new to the show, this is the Union of the Unwanted. It's when we just bring a lot of interesting people together to spark some interesting conversations. And that's what we're doing today. Today, we have a great mixture of people, different backgrounds, different researchers. And I think it's going to be a
Sexuality.
also sexuality, and so I think it's going to be a fun conversation. So people who let's introduce some of the new people. I know one thing that we've been talking a little bit about, I think in our personal lives, maybe on our shows, is some of the Armenian conflicts and stuff like that that's going on. And I know we haven't talked much geopolitics on this show in a while, and I think now is a great time to have Scott joining us because I think he can fill us in. So maybe we'll open up the discussion with that. Maybe we'll see if if Scott has a opinion.
Well, real quick, before we start, why don't you introduce the people who this is their first time being on the show, their show and their names.
So we'll go to. Well, I don't know what happened to Chris. Did I scare him with my technical difficulties?
Probably.
I'll try to get a hold of Chris and get him to.
What's up, Jason? How are you?
But yeah, we'll get Scott, if you want to introduce yourself, Alex, and who else hasn't been here? Oh, Greg hasn't been on one of these shows before. And yeah, if everybody want to just give a brief background so people can kind of know who you are and some of your work, and we'll go from there.
Scott, you want to go first?
Well, I'm from antiwar.com, and I wrote a book about Afghanistan. And I do a show, interview show.
Alex, you want to go next?
Sure.
Have you been on the show before?
I've been with Ricky, never in a crowd. So I'm originally Croatian, living in Monaco, a former hedge fund manager, author, blogger, like that. That's about it.
Greg?
Okay, my name is Greg Palast, and you can tell from the hat that I'm an investigative reporter, which most of my reports over the past 20 years a lot of it centering on vote suppression, as they call it, and mostly for The Guardian, Rolling Stone, Nation, and I've written a bunch of best-selling books, including my latest, which is How Trump Stole 2020. We also have a movie out, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, and we just put out a 1-minute PSA, which I would encourage everyone to watch. It's hosted at Leonardo DiCaprio's Instagram site, but you can also pick it up through gregpalast.com.
Ricky,
and by the way, one added thing, since you were talking about, maybe we'll mention Azerbaijan and Armenia and their conflict. Like, let's bring up some substance once in a while in these shows. It's not all Trump. I was in Azerbaijan for BBC television and Channel 4 News, and so I'm happy to talk about that too.
Yeah, well, Alex, do you want to tell people the name of your book too? Because I know you said you kind of glossed over it, but you're kind of an expert in that field. Something we haven't really talked a lot about.
Yeah, I wrote the book originally called The Killing of William Browder, which was promptly banned by Amazon at the request of the State Department's Jonathan Weiner, who was the advisor to John Kerry under Obama administration. It was republished by the Red Pill Press with a changed title in case anybody got offended by the word killing. So it was now it's called Grand Deception, but it got banned again. So now it's only available at the site of Red Pill Press. And there's a couple more books sloshing around in my head. They're going to come out, but I've been I've been busy.
Yeah, and you also know quite a bit about economies and whatnot. So that's something I think maybe we could probably discuss today too, because I think
Sure.
a lot of
Yeah.
people.
I honestly, I put the last 20 years of my life trying to figure it out, how the whole damn thing works. I think I've pretty much come full circle, but I had to unlearn everything they taught me in university, you know. And so, yeah, I think that's a hugely interesting subject. Not the funnest thing, you know, not the funnest thing to immerse yourself in, but I think hugely important, because we're going to have to be making very, very important decision going forward, unless we want to passively acquiesce with what they have in store for us, which I don't think anybody really does, to the extent that they understand what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So if Scott, Greg, if you guys want to talk a little bit, I know Sam's probably very interested, because I know he just did a great podcast on it, him with coming from that country, being Armenian. I'm sure he's very curious on, you know, people's take on what's going on
Well,
there.
let me, Ricky, I'll just give a very general overview, and I'll let Greg, I know he knows all about the oil politics of the Caspian Basin and all of that, but essentially the reason that there's a conflict is because you have a situation like having West Berlin inside East Germany in the old days. In this case, you have this region, Nagorno-Karabakh, which is Armenian territory, which is wholly inside Azerbaijan. And and it's ruled by Armenia. And they actually control some, you know, surrounding counties or whatever territories there that are actually really Azerbaijani majority districts that they also rule. So this is a long-standing conflict there. And interestingly, there's actually a part of Azerbaijan that's on the far side of Armenia there. So you would think that they could do a swap with easements and stuff and work this out, but ancient hatreds and all of that. And so what's happened recently then is Azerbaijan has decided to try to kick the Armenians out of there, which has led to war. And then, of course, the Turks are backing Azerbaijan, and I think the Russians have been traditionally backing both sides there. I don't know if anybody is truly taking Armenia's side over Azerbaijan. I know the Israelis are selling Azerbaijan. You know, they have a tight relationship with Azerbaijan. They have for a long time. And they're selling them cluster bombs and other things for use in the war. So, and they had a ceasefire, but it's not holding. They're still fighting. That's the top headline on antiwar.com today. So as far as what difference does it make to us and, you know, American corruption in the Caspian Basin and all of that, then I would certainly turn that over to Greg. And I can't wait to hear from Alex about his Browder book and all of that, because that's a really compelling story, and I'd really like to hear that later, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I've been spending all my time, as you can imagine, when you write a book called How Trump Stole 2020, you tend to be talking a lot about elections. I just got off NBC. So I'm actually happy to remind people that there's something else happening in this world, which is, of course, affected by the election. Okay, I haven't been in Azerbaijan in 10 years, but I've continued to follow. I was investigating for British television. Azerbaijan is on the Caspian Sea. It's an oilocracy. I call it the Islamic Republic of BP. BP controls, in fact, when I was arrested, and by the way, when I was reporting, here's the reason I was there is that when the Deepwater Horizon exploded 10 years ago, April, the oil companies, Chevron and Exxon and British Petroleum, of course, said, "Oh, this is a shock, it's a surprise. We didn't know that a deep water rig could blow out and blow up like that." Well, when they testified in Congress that they had no problems with deep water drilling, in fact, 9 months before the Deepwater Horizon blew up, they testified. In fact, 17 months before the Deepwater Horizon blew up, a British Petroleum deepwater well off the coast of Baku, in the capital of Azerbaijan, had this almost identical blowout for the identical reasons, and they covered it up. It was a well operated by British Petroleum and co-owned with Chevron and Exxon. So they knew what was going on. At first they didn't, by the way. Here's the interesting story is that, and I want to thank Private Manning, who's now, I hope he's out of jail by now, again, for releasing the WikiLeaks documents. Because what we found out in the WikiLeaks documents is that the Bush administration hauled in BP, the U.S. ambassador, working under Condoleezza Rice, and said, what the hell's going on? Chevron and Exxon are screaming that they're not getting their royalties. And the answer is British Petroleum said, well, because we don't want anyone to know that we had a blowout and we lost our biggest rigs out there. They blew out. And we don't want to shout that around. Now, you have to understand, international law and U.S. law requires the complete reporting of any such blowout. So they covered it all up. And Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State. And remember, Chevron had a tanker called the Condoleezza. So this is oil politics. And so the U.S., well, despite we have a very large Armenian population in the U.S., in the way politics runs in America, that would usually mean a pro-Armenian position. But Armenia is lacking in the juice. It doesn't have the oil that Azerbaijan has. So you have people like Henry Kissinger and others who are big backers of the Azeris. With the collapse of oil prices, the corrupt dictatorship of Azerbaijan, the corrupt, brutal, murderous dictatorship of Azerbaijan has clearly done the old trick of like, well, we're now very unpopular. It's a deeply impoverished nation. People there would talk about the wonderful days of freedom and prosperity when they were part of the Soviet Union. You have to go to Azerbaijan. They've gone from having trucks to donkey carts. And now it's gotten worse with the collapse of oil prices. Collapse of oil prices, of course, motivates the government of a guy I call Baby Baba. Everyone calls him Baba, the dictator. So, of course, when you're unpopular, the quickest thing to do is launch a war against your ethnic adversaries in Azerbaijan. Yes, the way that Stalin cut up Azerbaijan and Armenia, he mixed the territories for just this purpose. You know, it's the divide and conquer. You didn't want to have an Armenia that was made up of Armenians and Azerbaijan made up of Azeris, because that will lead to what it ultimately did, the collapse of the Soviet Union. So we have this fossil map created by Khrushchev and Stalin, and now a war because you have an oilocracy which can't maintain power unless they whip up a war. And of course, the Azeris because they have this incompetent dictatorship, that if they do go to war, if the war really does break out, they're going to get their ass kicked. There you go. Look it up. Go to gregpalast.com. Just type in Azerbaijan or Deepwater Horizon.
Which side did you say was going to get their ass kicked?
Oh, the Azeris are going to be destroyed if they continue. Because while they are backed by Turkey, that's not going to help them. Because as you said,
is there any chance of this being somewhat of a proxy war as well with Turkey? And maybe because I think Turkey, being the Ottoman Empire, there's a part of me that thinks they want back into the game more, and they want to weaken Russia's kind of control over Armenia, and they'd love to get it mixed up again. Do you think that plays anything into it?
Absolutely. We have a proxy war it's kind of a hot diplomatic proxy going on between Erdogan, who has in fact quoted Ataturk, who said that Azerbaijan is the heart of the Turkish nation. So, in other words, they're basically claiming that this greater Turkey, and they're not trying to incorporate it into the physical Turkey. They're not doing that, but they're saying that we are Turkic people. They're Turkic speaking people, the Azeris. And of course there's a great deal of tension with Russia, which goes back to differences over Syria and the Kurds, etc. So yes, so there's this, unfortunately you have Azeris and Armenians killing each other for someone else's benefit. That's not unusual. I would note that it was Thomas Friedman said, capitalism will solve all these problems because no two nations have ever gone to war that have McDonald's. But I can tell you, having looked at the throwaway cups, that a lot of the of the Azeri soldiers who were gunned down, and Armenian soldiers and civilians who were killed, you know, had jobs where they had to say, do you want fries with that? So no, capitalism will not lead to peace in the Caspian.
Greg, just because we only have you for such a short amount of time, you mentioned WikiLeaks, you mentioned Manning, and you mentioned Syria, all very relevant in this sphere. What are your thoughts on the current illegal extradition of Assange and the utter silence by the mainstream media?
Well, you know, Assange and I just together received the award as International Reporters of the Year by the Mexican Association of Journalists. So my fellow award winner, and I'm grateful for the work he has done. I don't have to look. It's not about, one thing I want people to remember, it's not about Assange. It's about a journalist who is facing life in prison in a dungeon because he reported the truth. That's the job of a journalist. And I use the WikiLeaks documents. So why was Manning in jail and not Greg Palast? Why wasn't, you know, the New York Times reporters and the Washington Post reporters and my fellows at The Guardian? Well, actually, at The Guardian, we did face arrest. They made us smash up our machines, and they did try to arrest us. But yeah, so you know, what Assange was doing was simply trying to communicate the truth. It's not about whether you like Julian Assange or agree with his positions or how he operates. It doesn't matter. That's not the issue. That's all distraction from a direct targeted attack on the First Amendment. That's what's going on with Assange. And let's cut out all the crap about Assange and the particulars. It doesn't matter. We're talking about the arrest. There's only one reason why he's facing, you know, a lifetime in a dungeon for telling us the truth as a journalist.
And unfortunately, for those that don't know, Vanessa Beeley is now going to be under attack by the BBC in a special series. I'm going to be talking about it tomorrow. But they're trying to pull the same thing with her. She may come up on charges. So the BBC actually emailed her yesterday. She's pretty frantic about it. And this shows this is about journalism. And they are trying to criminalize people sharing classified documents. The counterintelligence 2020 to 22 documentation that's out there says leaktivists, hacktivists, and public disclosure organizations are on the same level as ISIS, Hezbollah, and other terrorist organizations, including Al-Qaeda. How do we turn it around, Greg? You've been in this game 20 plus 30 years now.
Well, remember, I was a reporter for BBC Television for their main investigative show, Newsnight, and also an investigative reporter for The Guardian. And while I have to say that the quality of news that's reported by BBC and The Guardian is of a level that we could only dream of in the United States, there is still, even among my fellows there, a long cultural history of fear of the First Amendment. They don't have a First Amendment in Britain. The mother country does not have freedom of the press. If anything else, there's extra restrictions on journalists than on the average citizen. There is really no respect for the idea that of releasing information in the public interest. I actually had fights with BBC and my Guardian editors over this question. I said, why do you want the government to tell you as my editor, you as my producer, what you can put on or put off? And so it's very difficult because you do have this culture where they really do believe that there are state secrets that must be kept. And I find that almost every state secret is not really a secret from our so-called enemies. I mean, let's face it. If Ed Snowden could get all these documents, do you think that Putin doesn't already have them? In fact, Snowden at one point was kind of hinting that he would give Putin the documents if he could get asylum in Russia. And Putin says, I don't need them. You know, it's a joke that secrets are kept from us. Just like, remember, I just told you about the Deepwater Horizon, where our State Department lied to us, hiding the fact that BP's Deepwater well in Azerbaijan blew up so that they were allowed to get a permit, by the way, over the objection of the Department of Interior, because they said, oh, we've never had a problem. So who were they lying to? They weren't lying. Were they lying to the Russians? Were they lying to the Chinese? No, they were lying to the American people. This is what was exposed in WikiLeaks documents. This is what's important to understand. It's lies told to us. These are not secrets. They're lies that they try to cover up. And that's what Assange was going after. And unfortunately, again, while I was, I couldn't do that report in the United States about the lies by Chevron and Exxon and BP. They did allow me to put that on the air, prime time in Britain, prime time in all over Europe. But I couldn't report that in the US. On the other hand, there's still this discomfort, even among journalists in Europe and Britain, about becoming part of the state secrecy apparatus. There's too much of a temptation to go along with it.
Hey, what's this about Snowden offering secrets to Putin? That's bullshit. What are you talking about?
Well, I was saying that there was a hint of that he could do that, but Putin didn't, obviously they didn't care about it. As a way to, this was not from Snowden. This is from the organization. So, but there was no way. So one of the problems we do have, again, is that it's about keeping secrets from us, not keeping secrets from enemies.
If no one else is going to jump in, Greg, I got one more big question. What are your thoughts on this election and mail-in voting? Because I know, I remember the best democracy money could buy. I remember you talking about 2004 and 2008 and all these different things, Bev Harris, the rest of it. Where are we today in 2020, and what do you expect with this election and all these mail-in ballots?
The book is called How Trump Stole 2020. It's not a prediction, it's a warning. If Trump wins because the voters chose him, that's fine. That's democracy. But if he's chosen by Jim Crow trickery, and what we've been finding throughout the book, and what I just issued a report for the ACLU and another report for Black Voters Matter, going through the purge list. We've removed 16.7 million people from the voter rolls in the last 2 years. Now, it's true, some people die, some people move. But our name-by-name analysis, and when I say name-by-name, working with the post office, eBay, Amazon, the rest of the experts on addresses, we've found that about half, a little more than half of the people who've been wiped out from the voter rolls in the past 2 years, they're not going to be able to vote because they don't know that they've been wiped out. More than half were illegally removed, and more than half of those are voters of color or young people. Wisconsin, and we took this information, for example, in Georgia, you see those massive long lines, 8-hour waits today, 8-hour waits in line for early voting. And yesterday, 8 hours in line. Why? People asked for mail-in ballots. They couldn't get them because 340,000 people were illegally removed from the voter rolls of Georgia. So they didn't get their mail-in ballots. They didn't know why. So they had to wait in line to go get a ballot. They won't get one, by the way. They won't get one because they're not registered. They'll get maybe a provisional ballot. And 925,000 provisional ballots were disqualified, just short of 1 million in 2016. It'll be worse this year. With mail-in voting, we can end up with a true disaster. About 1 in 20, according to MIT, 22% of mail-in ballots are never counted. So while no, there's not fraud, we're not going to get 100,000 ballots from Venezuela. That doesn't happen. In fact, I just looked. You're 520% more likely to get hit and killed by lightning than commit voter fraud. So that doesn't happen. But voters who do mail-in ballots are defrauded by the government officials and by the partisan officials who are so-called poll watchers. We have an insane system in the United States that says that any nutcase in a boogaloo boy in a Hawaiian shirt can challenge someone's signature on a ballot and it gets thrown out. And by the way, just I'm sure that some of you will bring up the point. Yes, it's true that not all the vote thieves and purgers and people who challenge ballots en masse are Republicans. The Democrats disqualified 24,000 ballots in the Carol Maloney Patel primary. The Justice Democrat had won, but then they threw out more than 12,000 ballots and flipped the election back to the party-backed Democrat. So unfortunately, Democrats play this game too, but this time in this election, in the general, they're going to pay the price when the other side plays the same game, except on a scale that the Democrats can't even imagine and are absolutely not prepared for.
When do we have a president, Greg?
December 15th.
That's your guess, huh?
14th, when the Electoral College meets. Here's what I'm concerned with, and, here's the dark fantasy. We saw the Brooks Brothers riot in 2000 where Roger Stone, got a whole bunch of Republican consultants to cause kind of a mini riot at the Miami-Dade County Clerk's Office where they're counting ballots. Now imagine Boogaloo Boys and Proud Boys smashing up buildings where they're counting ballots. Roger Stone, who is the key advisor to the Proud Boys, he issues a tweet saying there's 100,000 ballots have been mailed in from Venezuela and they're sitting in the Tallahassee, Maine post office. How many minutes before that post office is burnt down? How many clerk's offices will be smashed, destroyed, attacked, burnt? I'm not worried about voter intimidation. I'm worried about intimidation that stops the count of the vote. And therefore, states like Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan will not be able to certify their votes in time. Florida has to certify its electors by November 11th. That's 8 days to count what may be 6 million mail-in ballots, 1 million of which are absolutely going to be challenged. I don't see how they get those ballots counted. And therefore, there's a very good chance that Florida simply will not certify its vote. Remember, you have to certify in time for those guys, the electors, to get on horseback and make it to Washington, D.C. This was, remember, this is the, from the Constitution. So, we could have we might not have 270 votes for any candidate in the Electoral College. It goes to the House, one state, one vote, and Trump gets elected. I don't have a problem if Trump gets elected again by the voters. I do have a problem if he gets elected by violence, which may be the outcome.
I have a question. Do you think there's any chance that it goes beyond that and we have some kind of weird contestation somewhere in January by either party?
Absolutely. I think that this is going to be fought even after the Electoral College. If the Electoral College meets and there's a clear winner, I think it's over. If there is a challenge, it's going to go obviously to the Supreme Court. We have the 1887 Electoral Count Act, which then the court will rule on, not just the Constitution, but the Electoral Count Act. And no one knows what the hell that thing means because no one's ever used it. That it goes back to the 12th Amendment, and we've never had a 12th Amendment election.
What is your thoughts on, the people that are not voting, because we're reaching such high levels? I'm here in Canada and I'm from Norway. Like we're having election numbers, people that are actually caring about voting being, 30% of the voting population. What about the silent majority of people that nobody's talking about that, giving up?
Oh, we actually have a gigantic turnout happening this year. I think this is going to set every record. The problem is, will people be able to vote? You're going to have 8-hour lines. You've got 22% of mail-in ballots are not counted. By the way, half of them because the ballots don't get to the voter in time. So, yeah, it's going to be a mess. But most people overwhelmingly do vote. Just so you know, we're running about 85% of registered voters vote. So the non-vote is not as big as people think. Those numbers usually come from adult age citizen population. In other words, the total number of people who could register and vote. But it's actually it's getting quite high again in the US. So we don't have a lot of walkaways, and we won't have, as we did in 16, there's the third party vote is collapsing, and the non-vote is diminishing to a fare thee well.
Hey, Greg, let me ask you this, not to take Trump's side in this thing, because I'm surely not, but there's so much hype from the Democrat side about how the Republicans are sure to steal it and how Trump's going to call out the Proud Boy militias and all of these things. And yet at the same time, you have Hillary Clinton saying Biden should not accept defeat no matter what, or he should not concede no matter what. And you have Rosa Brooks from Georgetown University held these war games with Bill Kristol as Donald Trump and all these things. And the way that they said it in her report for the Washington Post about her own thing, she said, in any circumstance other than a Biden landslide victory on election night, that the Democrats would fight and fight and fight and do everything they could to refuse to accept defeat on all of this. And so I wonder whether you think that, you mentioned about how, yeah, they you know, the liberals rigged the primaries against the progressives and stuff like that. But are you worried about, you know, Biden or the Democratic Party refusing to concede if
No, I'm worried about. No, I'm actually.
And what
worried
about
the opposite.
Antifa too? I'd like to throw that into there. What about Antifa and their role in intimidation and stuff like that?
Well, number one, I don't think anyone's going to be intimidating anyone. I don't see that happening. Because I can tell you that if the Proud Boys or these Boogaloo schmucks decide to harass black voters in line, I waited 5 hours in line with Souls to the Polls African Americans in Dayton, Ohio. I can tell you if a Proud Boy comes up and starts harassing people, where's your ID, something like that, they're going to find that kid in little wet pieces, you know, stashed around the lines. I'm not worried about intimidation. I'm not worried about intimidation from Antifa. You think Antifa is going to go to the suburbs of Lansing, Michigan, and start
or burning down what the scenario you said the Proud Boys were going to do with the burning down the ballots? Let's say.
No, I'm not guessing. First of all, remember they just arrested a bunch of people for trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan. Go to Greg Palast. Wait, just a second. Go to gregpalast.com, and I want you to look at the photos by Zach D. Roberts. Zach D. Roberts works for the Palast Investigative Fund. He's been assigned in the past 2.5 years to travel with the Proud Boys and the other far-right groups around the country. Take a look at the photos he had. By the way, he's also the guy, when you talk about photos, he's the guy who took the picture of DeAndre Harris as he's being beaten nearly to death by rods and wooden boards, nearly beaten to death in Charlottesville. That was by my team. We took those pictures. Zach had actually a gun in his face when he was taking that photo because they want to stop him from taking the photo. He says, go ahead and shoot. I've got the camera on. And so I've never yet, I mean, you have to understand, I've never yet seen, I mean, if I haven't seen, you know, tiki torch carrying Antifa people. Yeah, there was a one nutcase, and I have no doubt that there will be violence from both sides, but there's one side, and you can't just say it's all even. It's not. Almost all the vote suppression is coming from the Republican Party in the general. Almost all of it came from the Democrats in the primary. So you have to understand these distinctions. And right now, there's no question that the right wing is planning mayhem. It's an absolute fact. They're ready for it, and they're going to try to stop the vote count, not physical violence against people. I'm talking about violence against property and buildings and counting centers to stop the vote count.
But Greg, I would argue with you that either side of that, Antifa or Proud Boys, is probably be more post-election contesting it, and not so much on. I don't think there's going to be much problems at voting places, at polling areas, as you.
What about 2000? What about 2000 when Roger Stone, who now he's got control of the Proud Boys. Then he had just consultants, and they stopped the count in Miami-Dade. That's how George Bush is one of the reasons he became president.
I'm more of the belief that afterwards is where we're going to see the real chaos, because we're not going to have a winner on November 3rd, no matter what.
We're definitely not going to have. Well, we're not going to count. Most of the ballots will not be counted by November 3rd. The question is, will they be counted by December 14th? Will they be counted by the days when the states have to certify? It's the 11th in November 11th in Florida. Most states are November 30th. And I don't know how they're going to be able to count all these mail-in ballots. I think it's insane.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I'm curious. So you don't think that the military, the Pentagon, the State Department, or an alliance of countries that they're just completely ignorant, not involved in this entire, this entire scenario that you're putting forward? And what he's talking about is the Integrity Transition Project, which is a bunch of people who basically, as I see them, are giant globalists that are being run by the UN. But I mean, you don't think the military knows what you know? I mean, I don't understand how you're so sure that it's the right.
I'm sure you do. As you saw Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI.
Yeah, but you're only bringing up guys that are on the same side as you. Well, I mean, do you know military?
Whoa. What side am I on? What side am I on? I'm on the side of the voters getting their votes counted. I'm the guy that exposed the Democrats for stealing several elections.
That-
So which side am I on? Don't assume I'm on a side.
Greg,
But
well,
I am going to call out violence when I see it.
Well, it's happening from up here in Canada, all we're seeing is violence from Antifa and other groups right now that it's just getting swept under the rug. So how is that not intimidating right now? They're burning stuff down. They're attacking people. I mean, how is that not? And they're just getting let out of jail. I mean, there's a bunch of DAs there that are just letting people out. That's from what I see from up here.
Okay, well, that's what you see from up there. But our guy isn't looking from Canada. Our guy is right inside those protests. And by the way, on both sides, he's also covering Antifa. He's
Like
covering
you said, it's hard to, you're
ground.
locked down in the Hollywood Hills. Some of us are locked down in the middle of cities that have.
I'm not okay. I just said my cameraman Zach D. Roberts, who just actually go to GregPalast.com. You'll see the report he just wrote from the latest protest. He's followed these guys all over the country. He's embedded with them, photoing, including them nearly murdering a black school teacher. So I haven't seen Antifa try to murder a black school teacher yet, but it could be. But I don't know. I'm not a friend of Antifa, just so you know. No. I think that anyone who's throwing rocks and all this crap, I think it's insane for any side to be involved in violence. And if you're involved in violence, you should be locked up and the key thrown away if you're trying to stop an election. That's not only a crime of violence, but it's a crime against which is against federal law. And so
I guess I just have one question. I don't think you're right.
And I got to go in a minute, so I'll answer your question. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much. Because again, I followed you for 18 plus years. When they talk about these war games and you have William Crystal, for instance, playing Trump, but on the other end, John Podesta playing Joe Biden, doesn't there seem to be kind of like this bipartisan effort, love him or hate him, to get Trump out from the old school neocons to the new school neoliberals?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course. Well, that's called democracy. You don't like it? They don't like. Okay, look, I would love to see John Podesta play Joe Biden. That's got to be a hoot. That's got to be better than Saturday Night Live.
It happened.
No, I'm sure it did. I'm just saying is that's fun. That's fun and games, and that's democracy. Mm-hmm. I'm not worried about people arguing their case, voting their case, even people shouting and screaming. That's fine with me too. That's called protest. But what I'm against is what I'm very concerned about is officials removing the rights of voters, especially black people, Hispanics, and Asian Americans, and taking away their right to vote. And again, it's Democrats in the primaries, Republicans in the general. I mean, that's a rule of thumb. I'm not going to tell you that that's 100% in every case, in every instance, but we're seeing it en masse. It's ugly. And we're basically having a racial election in America, and it is an ugly and awful thing. I'm going to have to go. You can come and comment at my site. I'd love to see you. Send me a note and get on my Greg_Palast at Twitter, and Greg Palast Investigates is my Facebook, and GregPalast.com. So let's have a conversation. Let's mix it up.
Hey, Greg, thank you so much for being with me.
You guys are great. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
That was great.
I still want to hear Monica's question.
I just wanted to ask if he is actually okay with democracy if Trump wins, and what he thinks Trump is really all about. Because, Hitler won a vote, didn't he?
He did say that. He did say if Trump wins, that's fine.
And
I don't believe
my show also. He said it. I mean, when he was on my show, I know he gets. I mean, let's be honest. We all can be accused of being a little bit leaning one way or another. I mean, because we are. I mean, we have opinions. We look at the information. We come to a conclusion on which side, I guess, makes or is making the best points or whatnot. Greg, he said on my show, he's like, listen, if Trump wins, and he's obviously not a Trump supporter, but he's like, if Trump wins, and he's like, and does it, without cheating or what? I mean, but that's. But
why is that okay? Why is that okay? What people who don't like Trump? I mean, I don't like Trump because I think he's a fraud. I love Mel, and I know her opinion is different, but I don't like him for one reason. But most people who don't like him think he is the second coming of Hitler. And I just don't understand. Doesn't that invalidate democracy? I mean, doesn't it? They're trying to get it to invalidate the Electoral College, but I think that what they really need to admit is that it invalidates the system and democracy, which is why a lot of the people on the left, and he's saying the right, and that's okay too, but the people on the left are saying that, look, this process is not working. The democratic process is not working. So we have to take over. We have to get violent because it's the outcome that matters and not the process. So I just thought he'd be an interesting person to explore that because he seems like he's still dedicated to the process.
Yeah, I think most of us on this call probably agree that the whole process is rigged. You know, it's like, it doesn't matter who you get, who you catch cheating. Like, they're all doing things that are questionable, and they're going to do everything in their power to try to win votes. So it's like, okay, even if you catch one side, it doesn't mean the other side's like playing by all the rules or the.
That's my opinion. That's my biggest problem with the presentation you just did. Was it was definitely the whole pitch was this side's doing bad. I'm like, both sides are doing it. You're delusional to think it's only one side, and this is why it's gotten so bad.
On the other hand, though, I don't think Greg was ever one to think that Donald Trump was Hitler. I mean, he's not a fool. He's the kind of guy who hated Obama and Hillary Clinton both, and, covered Hillary's corruption in Pakistan and God knows what shit that no one else in the world was on. And I think, he was good on Russiagate all along. This is a bunch of bullshit just because, you know what I mean? Like all this anti-Trump hysteria.
I don't think I think he's a great journalist guy than that. I'm thankful that he was on, but it just seemed like he only saw once. He was pushing that one side, and my whole opinion is both of these sides are going to be getting super nasty. Well,
he really has for like 20 years or something. His single issue is vote suppression. If there's one single issue, there's a few others, oil stuff and whatever, but. And frankly, like, it's just the Republicans who are better at it, and they have these corporations where they get the contracts to go through, and they just kick off anybody whose last name is Jackson or Johnson or anything that sounds black or this kind of thing, and it's an art form, and they're fucking great at it, and he's been on their ass for it this whole time. So when it comes to who's suppressing whose votes, you heard him say like, oh, the centrist Democrats do this to the liberal, or, to the progressives and the leftists in the primaries constantly. As he put, the Justice Democrat won, that's the leftist progressive. And then they basically went and stole it from him by kicking out a bunch of ballots. The liberals did in the primary to make sure that the Clintonite type won and that kind of thing. So he'll attack the Democrats for the same thing, but just in terms of like who's actually in the business of suppressing the vote. It's the Republicans, because it's actually in their interest to do so. The fewer and the richer the voting pool skews, the better it is for the right. And the poorer and larger the number skews, the better it is for the Democrats, typically speaking. I'm not saying they've earned that or anything, but I'm just saying that's how it goes. So, according to him, they steal them all. I mean, according to him, the Republicans, they haven't won an election outright, fairly, even in the Electoral College or whatever, since H.W. Bush, I guess. Because in every case, they suppress so many votes to make the margin.
We could go a little deeper on the two-party psyop thing, and I would say, because I think it is a psyop, and I feel like that even if I've read some stuff, some statistical analysis that maybe Republicans really would never win, and they have to be giving this boost because they are actually kind of a fraud in that they're not fiscal conservative, whatever. So they are kind of the ultimate controlled opposition, and that everybody's kind of on board with them taking power once in a while so that this two-party psyop, which is so valuable, can march on. And then the second thing would be that they have for at least 20 years encouraged this idea that that the president is not legitimate, from the hanging Chad in 2000 to the Diebold voting machines in 2004, Obama's Kenyan birth, supposedly, the Trump with the Russiagate. If Hillary had won, it would have been illegal voters. If Cruz had won, it would have been that he was actually Canadian when he was born and not American, which was true. And they do this because it's the only way to get real conflict in a democratic republic, because that guy was saying, I'll take democracy, and he'll step down for that. But the reality is that if that were true, then you couldn't get a lot of conflict going. So they have to say that the president is not a democratically legitimate person, and they do it every single presidential cycle.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to comment since he yelled at me because I said that he was on his side. I mean, he said several things in a period of time, being on DiCaprio's platform. He's in the Hollywood Hills. It's not so bad. You know, he said a lot of stuff, the Boogaloo Boys and the Proud Boys. Like, does he know a Proud Boy? I know a couple. You know, I don't see them as violent, bad people. I see them as people who've had enough. But there's been, it's really sad to me that 20 days before an election where it's between us and the UN, and it doesn't really matter who the president is. It doesn't matter what side. We're all being played for fools. Every single one of us that's talking about the election or racism or bias or whose side is worse and whose side is better and who's going to cheat. This isn't about that. This is, it makes me want to cry at this point. We're 20 weeks away and people still think this is about two men that don't matter. This is about a country that is like, you have to understand what's going on where I am, but I know I've talked to people, you know, you guys in Portland and some other people in Philly. It's just like right now, the problem is that I don't think either of these men are the issue. The issue is that if we put our hands in the globalists, which I believe Kamala Harris has been for 20 years, in the pockets of Soros and the globalists, Biden clearly is not there. The 25th Amendment ploy is really, in my opinion, to set it up to get rid of Biden when they think they win, so that they can put her there. But the true enemy, I mean, I feel like it should be all American people that value our freedom and our lives and our families, and all of this should be looking at what happened over the last 6 months and think, why? What happened here and why? Because it was a crime against humanity, against the people of all these countries. This is not about, I understand, I have feelings there's not even going to be an election. I mean, I guess there will, it's too late, but like, I feel like people are missing the point that the UN plans to have, they want to come in. The New York Times even wrote an article, is it time to bring the UN in? The UN's whole goal is to one world government. Why don't people understand this? Do your own research. The Rockefeller Foundation laid this out 10 years ago perfectly, and they're all following it. Build back better it's not a good thing for humans. It's not a good thing for humanity or freedom. And that we're all squabbling over nothing, when it's really the fact that there's people out there that want to cede our sovereignty to a world government actively winning. And we're sitting here talking about a man that's clearly not with us, and a woman who's been in Soros's pocket for 25 years against Trump. At least we know what he is.
Yeah. Well,
do you want? Oh, I'm gonna go to Alex because I know it's late there, and I don't want him passing out.
Yeah, I want to hear about Browder. Can you tell us about you wrote a whole book about that fake ass scam of him and his whole thing there?
Yeah, I did. I basically.
Do you want to make comments on what we were just talking about? Just I guess before we move on to that big topic, do you have any comments on some of the things we were just discussing?
Well, yeah, but we could be here until tomorrow. You know, honestly.
Yeah, maybe we'll move on.
Let's say that from my point of view, Donald Trump is a much less scary choice than Biden-Harris ticket. But
come on, man.
I ain't black. Oh wait, I ain't white. I ain't properly white. So no, going back to Browder, basically what happened is that I just by curious sequence of coincidences came in contact with the man on 2 occasions, in 2005, then again in 2010. I heard his story. I was not terribly interested in the whole thing. I went to, in 2005, first time I ever saw Bill Browder, I just went there because I had nothing better to do. I was literally invited to his presentation. I didn't care at all about what he had to say because it was about investing in Russia. I was not particularly interested in Russia or investing there, but I went because just, you know, it so happened I had nothing better to do. But then I found the presentation very fascinating. It was the first time ever that I heard anybody say anything positive about Vladimir Putin. And the reason why this was interesting to me is because Bill Browder obviously had a very privileged vantage point. He was running a major hedge fund investing in Russia based out of Moscow. So it was the largest foreign-owned hedge fund in Russia at the time. So, you know, he knew a lot of stuff. He could tell a lot of details. And so basically what he was saying is that his company, his investment company, what they would do is they would invest into shares of some Russian company, like a major, like electricity grid or oil, some major oil company or something like this. And they said that the major thing that was dragging the share prices back was corruption. So what they would do then is they would investigate corruption, and then they would publicize it in the Russian media, but also in media like the Wall Street Journal and Financial Times and so forth. And he said that every time this happened, then Vladimir Putin's government would come in and they would clean it up. They would just clean up the corruption. They would change the people. They would change the laws to make the corruption more difficult to do and to get the corrupt people out of running these companies. And I was, up until then, I was very much under the impression that Vladimir Putin is the man of these oligarchs, that they put him in power, and that he was going to carry water for them. And from that point on, I kind of started paying attention to what was going on in Russia. And then fast forward 5 years, and all of the things that happened to Browder happened, namely that his quote-unquote lawyer got arrested in Russia and died in prison under investigation. And this time, Bill Browder was, so this was in 2010. It was another presentation that went along with some hedge fund conference. And this time he was saying exactly everything the opposite. Vladimir Putin was horrible. He was the Genghis Khan, the greediest tyrant there ever was. And nobody should ever invest a cent in Russia. 5 years earlier, he was saying the opposite. And so, well, I still thought Bill Browder was a good guy, but at this time. And then 5 years later, 2015, my ex-wife gave me the book that Bill Browder published called Red Notice. And it became a big bestseller on Amazon. It's got something like close to 6,000 five-star reviews. It's just crazy. And she read it and she thought, wow, you have to read this. You'll see the things are very different, you know, and you'll see Vladimir Putin is a bad guy and so forth. And so I thought, okay, fine. I read the book, and the book is really well written. I became convinced that it was ghostwritten by Lee Child. And the only problem was that by this time, I knew enough about the story that I thought something was not quite right. So then I had to read the book one more time. So, you know, on the second reading, I picked up a lot of things that you know, like passed under my radar on the first read. And so I realized that the whole story was basically a fraud. The whole story was a false one from start to finish. Obviously, you know, there's some truth to it, but you know, as the Italians say, truth is the sugar that makes you swallow the lie. And so one thing I realized by kind of analyzing what was in his book is that he is fronting for a large network of power, which is, by the way, the same people who are orchestrating the color revolution for your country and who are actually pushing for World War III between the West and Russia, basically. And so I thought somebody has to unmask this person, somebody has to unmask this network. And then I realized kind of it's probably going to have to be me. So that's how I made the decision to start writing the book. Initially, I just thought I'd just go through Bill Browder's Red Notice and point out all the nonsense, the bullshit, the inconsistencies, because there's a lot of it. You really have to suspend disbelief to buy the story, which is easy to do because it's written in a very clever way that it's almost like Hollywood movies, you know, that when just before they're gonna throw mud in your face, they give you some emotional story, right? So they prime your emotion and then they tell you the lie. And then it kind of goes below your bullshit radar and you carry on reading the story. And so, you know, it's very, very clever how it's written. And so basically I started just going through the book in detail, exposing these lies, of which there are many. But as I researched some of them, I realized that the part of the book that is not the part of the book, but the part of the story that's a lot more interested is the broader context, which brought me back to 200 years back. Brought me back to the US Civil War. And I discovered things that I didn't know. I went to school in the United States, right? I was there on the student exchange program when I was 17 in 1987. And then I stayed for another 2 years of college. And then I went to Switzerland to do another 2 years. So I completed my 4 years of university in American system. I studied US history, US politics, all of those things. I never heard ever once mentioned that Russia had any role in the US Civil War.
Boom, there we go. Boom, that's it. That's
Yeah.
what we're talking about right there.
Yeah. And amazingly, you know, those things carry forward to this day. That's relevant to everything that's going on today. And so basically what happened is that you had something called the British Empire. And the British Empire, as the logic of empire dictates, it can't have rivals. An empire cannot have rivals. So up until that point, the British Empire was controlling all the major ports in the world, all the trade routes. And the problem was that the United States suddenly, in a space of about 50 years, had like a staggering rise in prosperity, development. And the people running the British Empire decided, well, you know, this could be our rival, so we better do something about this. So the decision was made to partition the United States into two smaller, weaker client states. So they started playing the South against the North, arming the South, antagonizing, you know, orchestrating these you know, Armenia versus Azerbaijan conflicts, you know, because that's how the whole thing always works. You know, they can't control you militarily, so they always pit one side against the other, and they do this the world over nonstop. And they've done it in my country. I was born in Yugoslavia. Now I'm from Croatia because Yugoslavia fell apart because they pitted Croats against the Serbs and so forth. And so basically what happened is that as this thing took off, in 1863, when it became apparent that France and Britain might actually militarily intervene in the US Civil War, Russian Tsar Alexander II sent two fleets, one to New York and the Pacific Fleet to San Francisco, anchored them there for 6 months and prevented the Brits from partitioning the United States and creating two client regimes there. So that, I think, is a much more interesting context to the whole story than just Browder himself, who is just one deep state rat who has done bad things. But I think that the wheels have come off of his credibility already years ago. And so I think there's not much more damage he can do.
Well, I'm not so sure about that. I mean, he seems to still have quite a lot of influence and was, you know, prominent in pushing the Russiagate hoax and telling everybody, believe me, I know this stuff is right and that kind of deal. And he's got, you know, a law passed, that Magnitsky Act, named after his, as he put it, his quote unquote lawyer, who wasn't even really his lawyer, his accountant, who apparently died of natural causes in there. I wonder, was that what you found? Was that he wasn't even murdered at all, Magnitsky?
Well, he may have died of natural causes, but they were preventable natural causes. You know, it was a major cock-up.
Medical neglect, is that it?
Sorry?
Medical neglect?
Yeah, medical neglect, but it's a very mysterious thing because for Russia he was a very, very important man. He was their crown witness, not only against Browder but against HSBC, against this whole network that plundered Russia in the 1990s. The fact that he died is, if let's put it this way: had he died of lead poisoning, you know, a bullet to the head, or hanging like Jeffrey Epstein or something like this, I would be convinced that somehow Bill Browder or the intelligence network that he represents had him killed. The fact that he died of, Jesus, what was it, like his pancreas or something failed? I forget. The fact that he died of preventable natural causes tells me that either they were superbly clever about how they killed him, or the Russians just actually cocked up and let him die when they shouldn't have.
I think Russia is a very interesting place. Like, I used to work on the Russian-Norwegian border for the U.S. for NATO, doing intelligence on the Russians, and just watching it from above, of course, and doing my research on Putin. I have a lot of friends, you know, both on both sides. You know, there's people that are, you know, very pro-Putin. There's people that just, you know, on the other side that despise him because they threw him out of the country, took their business, and destroyed them. So there's, you know, with Putin, he's a former KGB, all of his friends, you know, are KGB guys. And so they created, you know, the control apparatus that they currently have in Russia. But what's interesting with that is that, you know, Russia is quite free, actually. It's way more free than the US. Like, they don't bother you a lot like they do in many states or here in Canada, you know. But if you dare to step up, you know, and say anything against the great leader Putin, you start to get in some severe trouble and might suddenly die off, or those problems. We actually currently have, like, I used to give NATO secret documents over of all the naval positions of the NATO fleet over to, he was a border commissioner in Norway. What's interesting is, like, he was actually recently caught. You guys can look it up. His name is Frode Berg, and he was actually caught in Russia with Russian naval documents. So, like, he was actually a double agent, in my point of view, that, you know, we gave him all this information. He probably took it over to Russia, but they threw him under the bus, and now he's in jail and probably is going to rot there until he dies because he was basically caught spying. But, you know, who knows if he actually handed over documents on the other side. But again, you know, the whole, like, imperial thing, you know, all these empires that, you know, really want, like, Putin is more of a self-interested guy. He just wants to protect himself and his good old buddies in some of the old, you know, Russian, like Belarus and in Ukraine, you know, they got lots of, you know, interests with, you know, both ports and natural resources and so on. So he wants to protect that. He wants to, you know, the big fight in the Middle East that we have right now, you know, trying to take over Syria so Saudi Arabia could build a competitive oil and natural gas pipeline into Europe to then fight Russia on the other side. So you got lots of, you know, on the top, but then we were talking about the people behind. It's usually the banks, you know, the banksters that are behind everything, you know, funneling the money and making everything possible, all these wars, you know, pitting everybody against each other. And I think...
And we lost him.
Hey, anybody want to jump in on any of that? What we did? I don't know where he went.
We lost a few people, didn't we?
Yeah, well, Scott, I let people know. I mean, jump in, jump out whenever you want. You know, I know people have sometimes these go kind of long.
Yeah, I thought Scott was
Usually,
waving to say something, and then he vanished. I think.
Yeah, I'll try to get a. Oh wait, people are dropping. It's the NSA. They're listening.
Maybe.
I got fiber over here, baby. I'm golden. Let's go.
Well, you know what John started saying. You know, like from my point of view, you know, I kind of try to gauge Putin with his performance at his own job, which is not to satisfy our, you know, sense of democratic decorum, but how he has done by the ordinary Russians. And he has done spectacularly well by the ordinary Russians because he inherited one of the, if not the most corrupt nation in the world at the time. He cleaned it up, and the economic development that has ensued actually over the same period outpaced the development of China. So he has raised the standard of living for the ordinary Russians tremendously. And that's what he was elected for. And that's why he has overwhelming support and trust among the Russian people who actually live under his rule. On the subject of people getting killed, if they have something bad to say about Putin, that doesn't check out very well either, because, you know, most people don't understand who the opposition is in Russia. You know, like in the Western media, they serve us up these various Navalny's and other minor figures. Navalny couldn't fill up 2 buses with his political supporters. He's a blogger. He has been effective at outing also some corruption in Russia. He has many enemies from doing this job, but he's not credible opposition to Putin at all. The opposition to Putin are the communists. And that's the only credible and real opposition to Vladimir Putin.
I was going to ask you about that, because I wanted to, what I've heard just from people I've talked to is about this stuff in the military is that Putin actually has been very helpful and interested in exposing a lot of what happened with Uranium One that America doesn't even talk about. I mean, they act like it never happened. But from what I've heard, Putin has met with, you know, that Putin and Trump really are at this point fighting the same enemy. And a lot of people say that G is also, that a lot of this is a show, and that a lot of the people that we're looking at and people are pointing at, they're playing kind of a part, but that Trump and Putin have a similar goal and the same enemy right now. And when we call it the invisible enemy, it's basically the same people you're talking about from Russia and everything, which is the, you know, I like to say that it's it all goes back to the International Bank of Settlements, but, you know, to that same, those bankers that, you know, finance all this stuff that are so above us all, you know. So in what I've been hearing is it's for multiple reasons, but that, you know, this hunt for Red October concept, where it was like the whole 2016 thing and the Russiagate was really to force us, America, into a war with Russia to benefit the international banking cabal, and that they both knew it. Is that, do you see that when you look at that, like politics from that angle?
Well, I think that you inevitably converge on those conclusions, exactly. And I think that I also tend to agree with you that a lot of what we're observing now is a show, you know, because they can't play open cards, you know, like Donald Trump can't play open cards and tell you what it's all about. Vladimir Putin can't either. Neither can Xi Jinping. But I think it seems to me, from just observing, reading the situation between the lines, it seems to me that they have all understood who the enemy is, and the enemy is incredibly insidious because they are capable of infiltrating a country, even if they get thrown out. Like, you know, Andrew Jackson threw them out in 1832. They crawl right back in through 10,000 channels and take over. And so if Vladimir Putin threw them out of Russia, or at least put them in check, well, you know, they can wait him out because they work multi-generational. So
right. People in America don't, I'm sorry to interrupt, but people in America don't know that he kicked out the Rothschild central bankers, and they're not allowed to do business anymore in Russia, as he did the Gates Foundation. You know, I mean, I think that these world leaders that are all being pitted against each other in our different media really, I believe it happened in Japan at the G20. I'm not sure that whatever that meeting was in Japan about a year ago, but I think that all these guys decided, like, okay, it's all of our sovereignty and our national, you know, culture and religion and language and history, or we're ceding. One of us falls, we all, these main people, they all fall. And I feel like unbeknownst and certainly not welcomed by what I call the banking cabal, an invisible enemy, they are fighting against them. It's like, that's what I keep saying to people. I don't really think our election has any consequence if we're willing to lose our country over it, you know, because this isn't about Trump. And Trump is really, I feel like you're saying, they don't report that Putin kicked out the cabal, the banking cabal here. I don't know why, but they don't. But thank you, because I wanted to hear that from somebody who actually knows. Great.
Well, I think you know, like, I think we have to kind of connect the dots, because it isn't served up. You know, a lot of this history and a lot of what's actually going on is being deliberately concealed, you know. But it seems to me, by reading between the lines, that I think that at least people in U.S. administration who are loyal to Donald Trump understand the game. They understand who the enemy is. And you can see that in a lot of, you know, like, the mainstream media won't serve this up. But if you listen carefully to Donald Trump's speech at the World Economic Forum, his speech to the UN, certain of his statements, measures, and so forth, it does seem that there's a little bit of method to the madness. But, you know, like, he can't come right out like John F. Kennedy did, attack them frontally, because he puts them all on notice. And the network is incredibly powerful, because it's the banking cabal, it's the large military industrial corporations who have the interest, it's the big pharma, it's the big media. And if he antagonizes them, takes them head on, they will just close ranks and destroy him. So he kind of has to choose his battles and then pick them. You know, like, I think he managed to take over the FBI. But they're everywhere, you know, and it's a long struggle.
Right.
And I think that inevitably he has to work with the Russians and the Chinese. He has to, because they are all they're all targets of this same cabal.
I think the main point you mentioned is this invisible enemy is multi-generational. People cannot wrap their head around the long-term plans. You know, all they see is that we have a political thing that goes every 4 years, and they can't even imagine that these cabals have generations of plans going on and on and on.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's at least 200 years that they've given themselves the project of actually just taking the world over with the franchise of with the central banking franchise. And this is who we're dealing with, whether we're looking at the Nagorno-Karabakh and the Armenia and Azerbaijan, whether we're looking at the COVID-19, whether we're looking at U.S. elections and Antifa and BLM and all of this stuff, George Soros, they're all their agents. So I think that this is the main enemy, and I think that they've been facing serious headwinds, you know, because I think that they've been definitely cultivating China as their new host, you know, because they've pretty much depleted the United States, you know, militarily and economically. They need a new host. They built up China, because if you look at the trading abuse that China has been able to get away with, and in that sense, Donald Trump is right. You know, China has been able to do what no other nation would be allowed to do by, you know, debasing their currency so they could outcompete everybody else. So suddenly all the manufacturing jobs moved to China. You know, you wouldn't be able to do this unless you got the cover from very high on up, meaning higher than sovereign leaders in democratic nations.
Right.
And so they built up China to be their next host. It seems that it isn't quite working out the way they thought. So, you know, then maybe they need to force a change in China, orchestrate a war against China, or something.
I'm not sure. A lot of the aggression is strange, but I'm not positive that G is who we think he is, because I got a lot of information about what happened about a year ago in Japan, And I think all these guys feel like they were all played, like everyone was played. You know, there are two factions. People don't realize, I think America doesn't think like as globally as a lot of foreign countries maybe do. And it's, a lot of people don't realize there's two factions also in China. There's the good people who want to help their people, and there's the deep state, or as we call them here or there where you are. And it's all the same people. I've been telling people for so long, the Trilateral Commission, all these, this Council of Foreign Relations, all the think tanks, all them, Bill Gates, Eric Schmidt, these people have been investing in China for 20 years. Yeah. I keep telling people, look at the UN. I mean, the most important agencies at the UN are now run by Chinese nationals. And that's why I'm grateful that Putin has given Trump a lot. I feel like he's given Trump quite a bit of information on Uranium One, but I think it's for the best of everyone. And we're seeing these rogue ships from China. Like, it's not making sense. It doesn't seem like, it seems like there's factions fighting against each other in China, and because of they're communist and they're not getting the news out, that we're not seeing that. But to think that our election is about America at this point and not about like the free world as a whole is just very naive. And we're not getting that news here. That's why listening to you, I feel like, oh, thank God. Like somebody saying like what's obviously the truth, but people want to argue about, you know, who's the bigger racist, or who's going to cheat in the election, or who's going to cede office, or war games. And I'm thinking, it doesn't matter if we lose. I mean, clearly, they're going to cede our sovereignty if Biden and Harris win. And it's already done. They already are bought and paid for by China and Ukraine, and we know it. But America's fighting over nonsense and who's right and who's wrong and who's bad and who's good. And it's like, wake up, this is a planet, and it's either for all free people, we the people of the planet, or, you know, all of our countries are going to disappear and everyone's going to say what happened while we all sit in smart cities wondering. You know?
Hey, Nancy, let's go to Nancy also eventually if Charlie and the TruthZilla crew want to jump in too, because I know that you guys have been listening for a while.
I think it's so fascinating. I think that all of this is all distractions with what's going on, but I do believe, like someone said to me today, I really don't like the choices, Biden or Trump, but I do believe that Trump is the least of our problems compared to if Biden wins, because of his connection with China. I mean, lots of people have problems with Trump for some reason, but I think that you really have to look at, is he the least of the two evils? And I think he is, just because he doesn't have that whole Hunter issue and the Chinese thing. But there's a bigger thing going on. And I'm totally amazed that people don't see the truth. And I wonder why. Like, is it because they can't handle the truth? I mean, I know that most people are educated no matter what. So is it all these distractions? Is it the media?
They don't want to.
People, because they don't want to. But that's a problem, because then we're all going to fall.
Well, I think that it's deliberately made very difficult. You know, the United States has been very, very heavily propagandized and manipulated for decades, because it's the leading power, and they don't want the democratic process to be in their way, right? So, you know, like, they want resources. They go to Iraq, but they don't tell you we're going there for oil. Only Trump told you that. He used to tell you that you're going there for food. So it's, you know, like, it's non.
Alex, we're losing you. I think.
But I think he's right, because Trump tells the truth. I mean, people may not like that, to hear that. But if I had to believe Joe Biden or Trump, I'm going with Trump. He may be rough on the edges, but he's protecting us in so many ways. Like, someone interviewed him and said, but who's your enemy? And he says, you wouldn't even know who my enemy is.
Ah, interesting.
He said they're people you've never heard of. That's
Yeah.
what he said, and that's the truth. But we've heard of them. Unfortunately, our country, it doesn't. I don't know if it's apathy or it's not wanting to believe that everything that they've been told is not true. But yeah, I mean, it's what we're talking about. But
TruthZilla, you want to jump in on this?
You know, one of the things I was just gonna say is, like, Alex, I really appreciate your perspective. You know, we're in quite a little echo chamber here over on the North American continent here, and like, what are your thoughts? Like, just as of 6-7 months ago, you know, it was all of a sudden this quickening of all these agendas that you talked about. Like what shifted? What changed? What made them, like, in their dark, smoky room, like, decide, okay, now's the time, let's roll all this out? I've got some thoughts, you know, but it's a little more esoteric maybe, but I really want to see, like, maybe what your perspective is.
That's a great question. That's a very important question. Okay, so as far as I could work it out, I think that they had to fast forward a number of their agendas. Okay, so we have now this coronavirus pandemic, right? I think that agenda probably was intended to be launched either along with the world war or after, in the immediate aftermath, you know, when people are traumatized and disoriented to the maximum, and then they go along with this. I think they had to push it forward because they couldn't get a war going. And, you know, like we talked a bit earlier that the Russians and the Chinese and a number of other forces in the world, like Iranians, maybe Belarus, have understood the game, so they're not falling for the bait. They're not falling for the provocation that maybe 100 years ago would have triggered a wider war. So the last attempt orchestrated by British intelligence and diplomacy was the attempted invasion of Iran, which would have probably triggered a wider war between the West, the NATO, United States, and Iran. But that didn't work out because, I don't know if you remember, but they downed the US drone. And then there was, you know, the British actors were trying to flood the zone around Trump to kind of coerce him into launching an attack. And Trump said no. And then that's when Sir Kim Darroch, British ambassador, went berserk, fired off a bunch of cables, and then the Anonymous shortly thereafter leaked out. The interesting thing about that is that apparently, according to WikiLeaks, Anonymous is controlled by the FBI. So since it appears that Donald Trump managed to take over the FBI, then we know that probably it was Donald Trump and his people who caused the British agenda to be brought to light. And then Sir Kim Darroch had to actually, it was quite a scandal, he had to resign from his position. This was kind of glossed over in the media, but this was a major event. Okay, so they didn't get a war. And we went then to this COVID-19 agenda, which is horrible, which is extremely dark. And why did they rush it? So that was your question, to go back to. So here's what started happening in September of last year. The repo market. I'll have to explain this because it seems like it's like a weird esoteric thing, but basically what happens that when banks in the United States close their books at the end of the day, they have to have a certain level of reserves with the federal in their accounts at the Federal Reserve. And then in September, something started going wrong. First, the interest rate on these. So the repos are repurchase agreements, right? And here's how it happens. So let's say, Scott, at the end of the day, you're short. You don't have enough money to cover your reserve requirements. And then you say, hey, Alex, you know, can you loan me $100 million? And tomorrow morning I pay you back 101. So for me, it's like, you know, $1 million overnight. Excellent. So, you know, no problem. So this repo market was functioning almost on a routine basis. Banks were loaning each other funds overnight so that they could square their books. except that something went wrong in September and the interest rate jumped. It spiked quite high. I can't remember what it was, but maybe annualized 10%, maybe something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, it was 10.
It was 10. Okay, awesome. So that's what happened. And from that, so what does that tell you? That tells you that, you know, I wouldn't lend you money overnight only, you know, to make the easy $1 million overnight, only if I thought that you're bust and you're not going to be able to pay me back. So at that point I say, okay, Scott, look, I'll lend you $100 million, but you're going to have to pay me 105 tomorrow morning. How's that? And so it was obvious that something went terribly wrong. That is, the banks in the network realized that one or maybe more than one of them was basically finished, was bust. So there, the Federal Reserve had to jump in, and the Federal Reserve had to provide liquidity to cover these the lack of liquidity in the repo market. And so it started being like, I think $12 billion overnight, then 24, then 25, then it went to 100 billion overnight. I think we pretty much got to 1.5 trillion repo bailouts. And I think that they're planning to go up to $5 trillion in repo bailouts, which means that the financial system has run its course. It's actually falling apart. And now the only way to keep it together is to monetize more and more and more debt, to make all the bad debts that are on the books of these banks, to backstop them with the taxpayer money, which is not really taxpayer money. They're simply printing it out of thin air, but it eventually comes back to the taxpayer burden because it'll result in high levels of inflation, right? So instead of, let's say, instead of the establishment letting these banks and their zombie corporations fail, they will just keep printing money, bail them out, and they will let everybody else take the hit through inflation. So simply your savings, your pensions, whatever money you have is going to progressively lose purchasing power. And the objective of this game is simply to keep the governing structures intact through this crisis, but you can't do it with effective democracy, because people will say this is just not okay. The amounts of money that are being printed out of thin air are absolutely staggering. You know, like when they tell you so many trillions, you know, 50 trillion, 20 trillion, 100 trillion, people get lost. It's like zeros. What the hell is this? But when you calculate the number per man, woman, and child in the United States, or per taxpayer, you realize that they just printed up something like $30,000 per man, woman, and child, and gave it to the banks and corporations.
Right.
Right. So you can't do that under a democratic system. There's going to be pushback. It's not going to work. So they have to bring in a totalitarian government. That's what they have to do. Well, we have the same problem in Europe. The same exact thing is going on. The ECB, European Central Bank, is doing the same thing. They're printing up money like there's no tomorrow. They're bailing out corporations and banks. Bank of Japan, all the major central banks, they're doing this in a coordinating manner, and this global totalitarian regime is meant to be rolled out everywhere across the world.
So did the COVID plan come first, though, and then this was actually an opportunity gained at the end of last year? I mean, look at all the CEOs that also left, and this COVID thing's been in the works for a while. So it seems to me like that became first, and this was an opportunity to use the new modern monetary theory or whatever to bring in the totalitarian.
Yeah, I think that was the intent, but I think that they had, you know, like I think that they were preparing it, but you know, launching it like this without a war, without a foreign enemy to hate and to close ranks behind the government to fight. You have opposition. You have, look at us. We're talking about this, right? you have a lot of people having a lot of opinion, and I think that the whole project has completely lost credibility. Practically nobody believes it anymore. You know, like I remember in March, I would say this whole thing is complete bullshit, and people would come back, oh, what, you want people to die, you know, and stuff like that. Now I kind of look, you know, like, and for newspapers, the official newspapers who still allow comments, or if they publish their articles on Facebook and then you see comments, it's virtually 100%. Nobody believes it. Like literally nobody believes it. So I don't know how you roll out a global totalitarian government when you don't have a really strong ideology, you know. Communism in Russia came out, there was an ideology behind it, you know. Here there's no ideology. There's just these elites that everybody hates, you know, like Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and George Soros. They're pushing it. The media are lying to us, and everybody understands that they're lying to us. And so I think that they pushed it prematurely. Another reason why I think they pushed it prematurely is it seems that they meant to have all these chip technologies ready, you know. I think they intended to have the vaccines ready so that they would vaccinate you, give you your chip, and say, okay, now you can go around, but because your chip you're cleared to move around. They don't have the chips. They don't have these passports. They don't have, there's so many things that they are, I think, muddling through, inventing as they go along. And the whole thing is, I think we're barely 6 months, seven months into the agenda, and it's already kind of lost all credibility with virtually everybody. And it's extremely important for us to cooperate. And I think that they're losing this. So I'm very optimistic that the project will fail, but I'm also concerned because they will not go down without setting the world ablaze to get their way.
And everybody's still walking around with masks on. So if people believe it or not, they're not standing up for themselves right now.
I want to say this. That's frustrating. That's very frustrating. But, you know, I think that we have to have no illusions that it's never going to be 100% of people who are going to be able to understand the truth and push for change. It's always going to be a certain percentage, 5, 10, 20%, I don't know what it is, but we shouldn't be discouraged. The other ones will catch up, you know, little by little, gradually.
So just so everybody knows, you know, the little town that I left last week, now that I'm in Iowa, they actually passed 5-2 that you need to wear a mask in your house if you have more than 10 people there. So I'm not totally shocked by this, because one of the reasons I was leaving was not only did they have the signs up on Main Street, but they were contemplating making you wear masks outside, not only on Main Street, but throughout the town. But they took it a step further. And remember, this is the place that 1 out of 15 people tested positive. They didn't even test half the population, and there were 0 hospitalizations, let alone deaths. So there are no real metrics here. And
so, Jason, if you live with a huge family, everybody in the family has to wear a mask.
If you can't stay 6 feet apart and there's 11 fucking people, Ricky, you betcha. But what it really is,
I saw your share.
Wow, so there goes your weekend orgies, right? You're gonna have to leave one out.
What they think they're doing is being slick with the students, right? Because all those students didn't leave. They all got apartments, Ricky. So now they got 3,000 kids that are in that place. They all want to have their Halloween parties. Well, the best they could do is when they busted a party of more than 10 people is $1,500 fine for the person that owned the home or rented the home. Now, if they've got 50 fucking people there, they got possibly $50,000, because it's $1,000 fine for not wearing your mask in my town now. It's absolute insanity. And if you look at the CDC's new numbers, 70.2% of those who got COVID when asked said they always wore a mask. 3.9% said they never wore one. So less than 4% of people that weren't wearing masks, according to the CDC, said they never wore a mask. Okay. And then 70+% said they did. That's how effective masks are. And I don't know if you guys have seen this yet. I couldn't believe it, but yes, an actual WHO representative. I loathe the World Health Organization. I'm not giving him any credence. I want to put that out there, but has now backflipped on lockdowns and condemned them.
They're scared to go to prison. They're scared to go to prison. Crimes against humanity. I mean, let's be honest. And I saw your thing today, and then I turned on Cuomo, and he said that the metrics in New York are different than the rest of the country because he has a better team working on it. I swear, I just saw your show. I flick it off. I put it on, and Cuomo's sitting there saying, New York has developed their own tests and their own data, and we're going to go with New York's data because we don't trust the other data. And as we've discussed, he also is in cahoots with Gates and Schmidt. So, but he's literally saying on TV, our data is not the same as the federal data. Only New York data matters to New York. And I'm thinking, and he's going state by state saying how bad everyone else did but New York, and he means it. But
and Biden wants him. Did you hear, Mel, that Biden wants Cuomo?
As the AG.
Well, it's all big cities. This is all Agenda 2030. You know, I live 2 kilometers away. They have now they created a metro area around our city, Winnipeg, here in Manitoba. And I live 2 kilometers away from mandatory masks. It's just, it's just insane. But it's all just coming. Here we had the conservative government putting in social, the Ministry of Social Development. No, sorry, Sustainable Development.
Yeah. John, you're for people who don't know, because you showed up late. You're friends with Tim, and I know you didn't really get a chance to introduce yourself. Yeah, it's all right. Do you want to just let people know? Because I know Monica was actually asking me. She's like, "Hey, where's Tim?" And I'm like, "Actually, John's here for Tim. He's the
yeah, I'm the better half of the Tim and John show that we currently have. I worked actually with Josh Sigurdsson, that probably most of you know. We started World Alternative Media about 4 years ago, so I worked with him for a very long time. Still do a little bit of videos with him. And then, of course, I worked with G. Edward Griffin on Freedom Force International on the council. We created the Red Pill Expo that currently was held in the greatest place that, this whole scam started at Jekyll Island. So I've been working with Ed since 2013. And then I've been writing a couple of books, trying to expose the whole scam. It's, the end of freedom, how our monetary system enslaves us. And then, of course, I had everybody in Canada. It's like, well, what's going on here in Canada? So I wrote a book actually in 2015 predicting the craziness. Canada has gone full Venezuela, by the way. We could talk about that for hours, but it's just insane what have happened here with the money printing scheme. So I kind of that's what I do. I'm a macroeconomics guy and monetary historian. I started with that in 2008, got interested in that and been doing it ever since. So, and you could find everything that I do on theeconomictruth.org. So that's all about me.
Awesome.
Hey, I have a question for Alex really, really fast. I think it's funny that we see this convergence of the banking, IMF, World Bank, and the fuckery that's going on with those people, and the COVID situation in, of all places, Belarus, where the president came forward and talked about how he was bribed with $1 billion by the IMF and World Bank to lock down his country, institute mask mandates, and do all that stuff. And he has said no. And now when I heard that, I thought, oh shit, this looks like this guy's exposing the scam. He's about to have a plane crash any day now. What do you know about that?
Essentially what you just said, but I thought that exactly gives it away. I published an article on my blog exactly about this because I think Lukashenko gave it away in saying this in public. So initially I just thought the news was weird. This was in June, and I thought it was weird that IMF would offer him $940 million and condition the loan on measures that would make it much less likely that they could ever repay the loan. Here's $1 billion and we want you to destroy your economy.
And
that's IMF's business plan, by the way.
Right. Who took the money? If he's being honest, there's probably countries that took the money.
Exactly. So that's exactly it, because 85 countries, so what? They basically destroyed the global economy. So governments all around the world can't make their budget, their tax receipts are down, and so they have to ask for loans in order to be able to pay the bills. And so the IMF and World Bank come through, they give them the loans and say but guess what? We want you to do this and this and this. We want you to really antagonize your people, make them wear masks, all this.
Debt slavery. That's
That's
slavery.
Confessions of an Economic Hitman. That's
Yeah.
John Perkins' book. in a
Exactly.
nutshell.
And so we know this thanks to Lukashenko, but all the other governments just simply took the money and forgot to tell the constituents what the conditionalities were. But that's who's pushing the agenda, obviously, because that's the only power that could persuade everybody to be so deeply entrenched in incoherence and madness and insist on it in spite of it making no sense and carry forward. You know, like the second wave, there's never been a second wave before of anything, right? Contagious come and dissipate. Now we have the second wave. Was there ever a second wave? No, but everybody is like, oh yeah, this is the second wave. Like, we know all about this. No foundations in science. It's all based on the PCR testing. Nobody's dying. I mean, like, you know, the death rates are low.
Also, that guy the guy in the beginning that tested the fruit that came back positive, was that Zimbabwe or somewhere?
It was Tanzania, I think.
He was another guy that I was like, okay, this guy's pulling him out.
He didn't make it though.
Yeah, they whacked him.
Well,
they whacked a different. There was another African country where they whacked the guy, not the Tanzania.
Not the fruit testing guy.
Zambia, Angola. That's a couple of terribly corrupt places.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things, Mel, that you pointed out the other day was just that how it's compartmentalized. So like regional specific, like the destruction. Like over here, it's the wildfires because that's our industry, like agriculture and timber and stuff like that. And over in New York, it's hospitality and all that. So it's so diabolical.
yeah, I mean, they have people everywhere. It's like he's saying, like they have it, like when Trump said, and that's what we talked about on your show, you guys, is like when Trump said, the people that I'm fighting, nobody's ever heard of. These are what we're talking about, the people that finance both sides of all these wars and that are financing Antifa and Black Lives Matter and probably every other group. But it's all over the world. The problem is that right now the election in America isn't about America. You know, it's not about this. It's really about, like, are we going to keep, you know, fighting with an alliance to like root this, like, the virus? Are these bankers that have made us all in all of our own countries slaves to their debt? Like he's saying, how many people took the bribe? So there's a huge brouhaha going on in Belarus or, you know, Azerbaijan and you know, Armenia. Why are they picking these places? They're strategically picking them, these same people. So, you know, and I wish people understood that Biden is just a puppet. And Trump, you know.
I think that's some of our frustration sometimes. I think people don't understand when you're deep into this. And there's, I mean, Alex and I we're joking a while ago about how I'm like, we're constantly sharing the same things unknowingly. Like 2 seconds later, I'm like, hey, he shared the same thing I'm sharing. And it's just like when every single day there's more evidence and more evidence of more evidence, then when somebody seems like they're drinking the Kool-Aid, you're just like, it's hard to like not get a little frustrated and like not be like, what the hell are you reading? Like, what the hell are you watching? Like, there's like, I get it. Like, okay, maybe if there's just a couple pieces of evidence that's like, okay, there could be fuckery here. Like, I get it. Like, oh, maybe you can accuse us of connecting dots that are a little further apart. But when there's so much evidence, to me, it's almost harder to, it takes more, who's leaving? Somebody, Alex, are you leaving?
No.
I thought somebody was waving. Oh, Grimerica. Oh, sorry, guy. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I got to go. See you guys.
Hey, thanks for joining us. And I almost feel like it's harder to believe the official story than it is the alternate stories, theories, because the official story is just like, how do you believe it when there's so much evidence proving that you can't believe the numbers, you can't believe statistics, you can't put your hope and faith in the tests being accurate? Like, so what evidence are you looking at to believe the official story? Because it's all wrong, you know? So I think sometimes when, you know, and I think in future shows, you know, I'm hoping to also get more people on who maybe have a different perspective. And Scott, actually, who joined us today, I got tons of positive feedback when I had him on last, because it was at the height of the lockdown. and we kind of differed in opinion on what was going on. And we had like a hour and a half, 2 hour show, whatever it may be, kind of just sharing ideas, challenging each other's ideas and thoughts or whatever. And a lot of people gave me positive feedback about the fact that it was just nice to see that people could have that discussion, you know, and I just think it becomes, you know, but in some cases, I think it's very hard because when somebody, like, I know Mel, you know, you're like, well, you know, you're on that side, or, you know, I think it's hard not to get emotional because you feel like, okay, you know, if you truly are down the middle, then let's critique both sides. Let's critique both sides and be open to it.
I mean, but there's an intolerance that I was reading. Also, I have a lot of negative feelings about, you know, I'm with DiCaprio, or I'm in the Hollywood Hills. It's not so bad. And, you know, but all I was saying was, I know some Proud Boys, and I know that Antifa is burning down and Black Lives Matter are destroying my area. So, you know, for him to go so over the edge, I get it. But, you know, I'm not going to act like.
But aren't there people on the other side too? There's also people who say that like nobody on the right is violent, and the thing is,
I don't think that at all. No.
Well, there are people. There are people on the right who say that, like, oh, you know, it's all, you know, the other side, you know. So I think there's extremists on both sides.
Well, live and learn. I learned never to tell anyone I think they're on a side. So,
I think,
you know.
Yeah, but I think there's one critical difference between these two sides, is that there's one side is being funded and organized by people like George Soros, you know. So I think that there's quite a difference because they are not only inclined to be violent, they're being encouraged to be violent. And I think that there's a lot of these like Proud Boys who are maybe a bit more genuine, maybe a bit more authentic, and they have no intention to be violent. And then if they, you know,
but aren't there also a lot of people in the Black Lives Matter movement? And I know a few who I think are just misguided, but we can also say the same thing, that they're genuine. They honestly do feel like it's a cause worth fighting for or whatnot. They're not the ones, you know, doing riots. You know, I don't like calling them protests because I think we blurred the line between what's a riot and a protest. We're calling everything a protest when it's like, wait, when you're burning shit down, it's a riot. It's not a protest. But I do know people on the other side who truly believe, like, I think their heart's in the right place. They might be misguided, but their heart's in the right place. So I think, like, you know, I guess I'm just making my point again, that that they're on both sides. There are people who honestly just believe in what they believe in. They don't want violence. They don't want to hurt anybody. And then there's also people completely extreme, you know, and it's no different than, like, you know, a Christian who might blow up a birth control clinic because they're anti-abortion. Like, they don't reflect all Christians, you know. So
well, I think the difference is the organization and the money behind it, as opposed to, you know, when there's violent people that show up somewhere, that's one thing. When there's violent people that got printed out, you know, got emailed a 15-page document on how to, you know, handle rioting and who to target and what to wear, and you can pick up your check at this Venmo account. It's a little different. I don't think that's going on with these, you know, I don't know any white supremacists. I don't. I guess I'm lucky. I've lived in a city all my life, in Philly and in New York and LA. I don't know any. I also don't know any, you know, gang people. I don't know these people, but I do know that some of them are organized, and when it's organized and it connects, and that there's flights and there's hotel rooms and there's food and there's a rule book and there's a playbook and people are bailing them out of jail, it's a little different. You know, the guys that are protesting, you know, the bikers or whatever, they call them Boogaloo Boys. I have no idea what that is. I keep hearing it. Proud Boys. I mean, you guys, you know, that's it.
So, Mel, let me talk about some real white supremacists for a second, because I think they're kind of a joke, and they're never portrayed as a joke. Instead of being portrayed as a joke, they do try to lump them in with, whether it be the Proud Boys or militia. Even I heard Greg Palast talk about the supposed kidnapping of that governor, when you have the sheriff now saying that it may have just been a citizen's arrest and not a kidnapping plot. There's a lot more to unravel there, and I got to tell you, I'm not against citizens' arrests of governors that are making outlandish executive orders that are oppressing people. At what point do we decide to do that? But to harken back to the white supremacism thing, In 2017, when I started doing this again, literally the first day, when I went to Bilderberg 2017 in Chantilly, Virginia, I was approached by the now infamous crying Nazi, the person who was eventually portrayed as Charlottesville's ringleader on Vice and got caught, did jail time, cried all over the news, Chris Cantwell. Cantwell knew who I was because of Loose Change, obviously, and some of the things that I had done. Now, Cantwell had started as kind of like this libertarian, literally in his mom's basement, podcaster and, you know, social media guy that started to get attention from the white nationalists and then went full-blown white nationalism, anti-Semitism, the whole thing. I still talk to him. There was nothing violent about him. It was by putting a camera on him and saying, we're going to put this on Vice and this is going to be big, that you build this persona of somebody who was an intellectual liar and crybaby at the end of the day, who had no fucking power. I don't care if he had 100 people out there saying Jews will not replace us with tiki tortures. They are not organized. They're ignorant at best. Cantwell's push, for those that don't know, that put him over the edge into white supremacy is that his girlfriend slept with a black guy and it became extremely insecure. That's the reality of these fucking people. That's the joke they are. But the media is never going to tell you that. Okay? And they banned my interview with Cantwell from YouTube after that. It was like an hour long. You can kind of find it. I think it's in the Internet Archives or whatever. And he tried to bring up, you know, the Jews run the media. And he said to me, he goes, and I go, well, what about Roger Ailes? Roger Ailes wasn't Jewish. And he's like, oh, I'm pretty sure that he was. I'm like, no, actually, Roger Ailes made some anti-Semitic comments. And then he also brought up Alex Jones. And for those that don't know, you know, again, Alex Jones, I'm the first guy he ever gave a show to. I worked at InfoWars from 2008 to 2010. He produced several of my films. Alex Jones has no Jewish influence. I promise you. I watched him as he built that empire up. It was not because he had Jewish influence or was protected by Zionists. That doesn't mean that now that he's so pro-Trump and right-wing, and obviously Trump's policies align with Israel and Sheldon Adelson, that he no longer talks about Israel or the Gaza Strip, etc. But these false narratives get created. And then not only does the media push them, but then they push these supposed white nationalist monsters that are supposedly pushing the same thing. Anybody that spends 5 minutes looking into it can see past the facade, but most people don't.
Absolutely. And one of the most frustrating things is the fact that the establishment, whether it's the you know, government or media, like they just absolutely refuse to acknowledge the what's going on in the streets. Like right here in Portland, man, like we have, I'm sure you guys have all heard the Antifa mayor. She's running for mayor of Portland, right? She says, I am Antifa, Sarah Iannori or whatever, however you pronounce her last name. And like on her website, she's got like this 10-point plan that she wants to do to address violence and right-wing violence, right? Number 9, it says, place flags at half-mast to honor all those who have been harmed by right-wing and police violence in Portland, and the flag should stay that way for a year to remind us of the justice we're fighting. Stuff like that. It's like it's just a complete reversal, putting it all on this side, but it's like absolute refusal to acknowledge that there is some sort of Antifa thing going on and just another person murdered just in Denver, right? Like, I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, really? Like, when can we just get back to reality and have this discussion? Like, I don't understand. It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You know? I don't know.
We lost us.
Hey, everybody still.
There it goes.
Yeah. No, I think it comes down to, like, I tried to start a political party here in our province, and I got attacked by both left, right, and center. Everybody was coming after us. We were vilified in the media. I was called an anti-government person because they caught up that I was at Freedom Force with Ed Griffin, and we had like probably 5 or 6 plans from different parties coming in and like posing that they were all for our platform, and then they turned against us right in media, you know, right on live TV. They suddenly come out with a liberal platform, like totally against what we were talking about. So they all hate because they have a controlled group, you know, left and right, that, you know, want to be in control, and they hate for any competition to come in to, you know, destroy the monopoly or duopoly, whatever you want to call it, that they created with the political system. You have that in all countries. Like they're trying to make it harder and harder in Norway, that I come from as well, to run opposing parties. I think the whole political system in itself, I think we're at the end game of everything, where we really the United States has been turning into like the end of the Roman Empire that we saw with a lot of senators, literally like murdering each other at the end because they totally, had destroyed their currency and destroyed their whole nation. So I think that's where we're at. The United States is just one thing, the chaos that are there, but we have the same chaos in a lot of other countries. Here in Canada, there's like Trudeau is a total sellout to the UN Agenda 2030. Like we have basically our budget is the Agenda 2030 platform. So it just infuriates me that these guys are, having this control grid that they created. We need to just, destroy it. And that's what my point that I made to Palast at the Palast and start there was that, there's such a massive amount of people that are not voting that, have just disconnected from the system because they don't believe it anymore.
Alex, I know you got to go because it's 3 a.m.
Thank you all. It was a great pleasure. Honestly, I enjoyed this very much. I wish I could stay longer, but my day starts in a few hours, so I need to get some sleep.
It's funny. You have people who live in the U.S. who are like, "Oh, it's too late for me." So I hope they listen to this episode.
Thank you so much. I really needed to hear a voice of reason from outside of our country, because people are fighting over the wrong thing.
Alex, can you tell people how to connect with you? Because I'm sure some of these people might want to, maybe connect after the show. Do you let people know where they can get your blog and all your?
Yeah. So the blog is called The Naked Hedgie, which is like as a hedge fund manager, and then the naked, like naked chef. There was no naked hedges, so I thought may as well. Yeah, that's it. And I don't know, maybe
Twitter.
Give people my email address. The Gmail.
Yeah, after the show, I send everybody the links to the audio video, and I'll put all your contact information so people can connect. So it's one of the best parts of this show is kind of throughout the 6 years I've been doing this, I've been able to meet so many interesting people. So to be able to share those interesting people like you, Alex, with a bunch of other people is one of the benefits of this. So.
Brilliant. I love it. Thank you all. It was a great pleasure, and let's keep in touch.
Thanks, Alex. Take care.
Thanks, bye. Good night.
Awesome. Well, he's still here. Yeah, so that's one of the benefits of doing this show is that and I love the fact that after these shows, I see so many people jumping on each other's show and connecting. It really is awesome to see that. But John, is Tim at the Red Pill Expo?
Yeah, he was at the Red Pill Expo, just actually ended today, and they ended up so there's a lot of people that were around me that were even in our Freedom Force Council that were doubting that Ed was going to have any success because of COVID, because of everything. You know what? It was 600 people turning up. We only had one Red Pill Expo that was even closed, and that was in Bozeman, Montana, our first one. I think there was thousands of people on the stream. So this was the right time. He had such a perfect timing on this. And, nobody was wearing a mask, of course, at the conference. And it was just a really good time. And Ed, of course, we're hanging out with Tim last night until 2 a.m. because Ed is a late night guy. He usually works till 3 a.m. on his need to know news and all that stuff. But he's up drinking with the guys until 2 a.m. And he's just a hardcore guy. He's 89 years old, and he is acting like he's literally my age. I'm in my late 30s now. So he is just full of, and this is just whole energization that he got from the conference. I'm going to call him in a couple of days when it's wound down, but I'm pretty sure he's going to be like a kid in the candy store, to be honest with you. This was at Jekyll Island, all places that he got to have this. So this was kind of the pinnacle of his total career. And, he's been in the alternative media for, many decades.
Yeah, he was. I had him on my show not too long ago, and I remember it was the first time in a long time I was legitimately nervous because, and honestly, I saw him I was at the Red Pill Expo in Hartford last year, and and I didn't have the balls to talk to him. I'm just like, I can't. I'm like, what am I gonna say to him? I'm like, you know. So it was one of those things where it's funny how like when you watch somebody and you know their books, you see interviews with them, and you watch them for so long, you still kind of get that like nervousness every once in a while, you know.
One thing, he's probably one of the most approachable people that I ever met. Sorry, Charlie.
Yeah, we were on the same flight out of Mexico City to Acapulco, or to Acapulco for an Acapulco event. And so we had, we were there like an hour before our flight, and I just started talking to him, and he's the nicest guy, you know. I mean, then he went up on stage. I said, what's your speech going to be about tomorrow? He goes, I don't even know. I haven't even really thought about it yet. And he went up there and he just destroyed. He just talked off the cuff for like an hour and a half. It was amazing. So he's a good dude that's been doing it for so long. And it's like, you can give people like our parents' generation his book, Creature from Jekyll Island. Say, this is written by an older guy like you, you know, just read it, and it'll open up their whole eyes. I mean, it might be too late for some people, but that book still holds up after a long, long time.
And I want to say he is a legit party goer. I want to say the last time I saw him was 2013 at a bar after a conference doing karaoke, and I was with Luke Radowski, Tatiana Moroz, and Josie Wales. And I remember he lasted at least as long as the rest of us, because on the way up to back to the hotel, we caught the elevator together. And we just talked about what a great time we had, and it had to be 2 or 3 in the morning. So, you know, props to Griffin, you know, a great guy all around. I got to bounce. I got 2 little girls upstairs I got to take care of. Ricky, thank you again, brother.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Thanks for being with us. I appreciate it. We'll definitely keep everybody in touch with the next one. Yeah, hopefully we'll have to get Mr. Griffin on one of these shows.
I'll get him in contact with you if you want to.
Yeah.
Ricky.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know who I talked to in regards to booking them, but yeah, I'll give it a try. I mean, it's nice that
try calling his cell phone number. Just said that John wanted to have you in contact with him, and that you want to be on the show. That's usually how I do it. So, like, I've worked with the guy since 2013 now, so he's usually if John like is referring somebody to him, he usually is pretty good at it.
Yeah, he'd be awesome to have on here. You know, there's a couple people on the bucket list. You know, we want to get Alex Jones on one, which is, I mean, that'd be awesome if we could get crazy Alex. I mean, none of us will be able to talk, but at least we'll listen to him for like 2 hours. Just go at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mel.
Jay Dyer's our connection to Alex.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Well, and Sam, of course. I mean, he's been on there. Yeah. So. Yeah, that'd be awesome. If anybody has video of Mr. Griffin doing karaoke, I'd also like to see that. That would be
I feel much better now. It went well.
I went and saw Alice in Wonderland in Las Vegas with him one time. That was quite the experience.
Well, that's a whole nother show.
Well, dude, he hasn't aged. I'm telling you, like he hasn't aged.
Oh, you should see him. I've been up at his. He has a beautiful place up in Paso Robles that sometimes we've had the Congress for Freedom Force at, and he's just up there. Like, he actually is the one, like the host, that sets everything up and all the tables and everything's like, Ed, do you want some help over here? Like, he's like a machine, but it's, you know, like, he's an extremely social guy, and he's been very healthy. You know, he's always been focused on that. So he's really a lead by example type of guy.
And maybe that's good news for all of us, that we'll have this karma for that us putting ourselves out there to be attacked and exposing stuff like he did. He took a huge risk that he was never taken out. Is you know.
Yeah, you should watch those Yuri Bezmenov interviews from the 70s, man, when they're all, you know, it's between the footage and the way they're dressed, and you're listening to it and you're like, holy shit, if our parents had been listening back then, we might not be in this mess. We're talking about some reality, talking about, you know, subversion of populations and how you would do it and everything. It's like, oh my God, it's like the playbook for what we're living through right now.
Yeah, and he was, I mean, alternative medicine. I mean, this guy, I know he's kind of really well known for his book on the Fed and whatnot, but I mean, he was talking about alternative treatments. I'm going to get kicked off YouTube now. Alternative treatments to cancer and all types of things like that. Like, way before, you know, I mean, before I was born probably. And so it's wild how long he's been talking about these things. Like, it's like stuff that a lot of people are just waking up to now. Like, I was like, no, this isn't new stuff. Like, there's been researchers who've been, you know, doing this forever. They just didn't have the resources that we have now, you know, to go do a YouTube video that might go viral, to do a podcast and whatnot. So it's, you know, my hat really goes off to these guys who were, you know, doing this for so long and really continue doing it, even though it was much harder to get a message across back then than it is now.
So
you know,
the ridicule, the abuse that you get for telling the truth by like powerful people. I mean, I just started, obviously I'm not no pro at this, but I just started doing it. I'm a big researcher and writer and I like history. But I mean, the abuse you get when you're just trying to like share literally facts with people.
Well, you got to listen to Rogan. Rogan, one thing that he said, and it's so true, don't read comments. Like, it just,
I know. I can't not. I'm not there.
Yeah, like you'll get to a point where initially in TruthZilla, I don't know how you guys have been doing it. Like, I know you kind of your podcast is fairly new, and Charlie too, actually. So have you guys been good at like not paying attention to that stuff? Because you guys are both, you know, similar to myself, but like outspoken on social media. It's not like you you know, you kind of stray away from like putting out your opinions and perspectives. Have you guys you know, is there any tricks to the trade? Have you learned to not read shit, or you're like, fuck it, I have thick skin, I can deal with it, I'll argue with people, I don't care?
I don't know how thick my skin is, but I definitely don't take it lying down. I get pretty fiery about I here's the thing. I'm all about a different narrative. I'm all about a different perspective, and come to me with different information, because we've talked about this many, many times. We don't want to be in our own echo chambers, right? But if you don't come to I'm an administrator of our, you know, content. So if anybody, I will catch that stuff in the daytime, people getting out of line, getting super disrespectful. When it crosses a line into disrespect, I let them have it. I need to develop thick skin, and I need to be quiet. In fact, it's really interesting. It was like the last couple days I went back and forth with someone on YouTube over, I think it was when you were on the Liberty Advisor, Mel, and someone said something that I didn't think was cool about the whole interview, and so I just let them have it, and then they started to go back, and I just unloaded. So that's just how it goes.
Yeah, I have the thinnest skin in the whole world. I really do. So I wasn't prepared.
And you're in Hollywood, Mel. How does that even make sense?
Well, I honestly, I'm one of the few people who actually had a job in Hollywood. So I worked like 15 hours a day, and I kept my head down. But no, I guess I have but that's the thing. I have a thick skin when it comes to being rejected by Hollywood, but I have a thin skin being rejected as me. You know what I mean? I'm fine. I've worked hard enough on my class and education and everything. If I walk into a room and I get rejected, or they don't like my script or whatever, it's fine. But when people are attacking me, you know, it's a whole different game. Well, and you know, I don't know.
You know what I learned is that, you know, I read a book called The Four Agreements, and one of the rules in there is like never take anything personally. And because it's always the other person's paradigm, you know, that they attack you. I was hackled at school for like 13 years, so I've got a really thick skin. And like me and Josh, like constantly get, like, I got death threats and got called all kinds of names, you know, over the time. But, you know, for me, it's like that rule is like never take anything personally. It's the other person's problem with you, unless it's actually constructive criticism. I've gotten a lot of that too, which is great. You know, the way you portray yourself and all this stuff and what you say and so on. So that's totally fine. But, you know, when it comes to you know, the personal attacks and all that stuff, it's basically when they don't have an argument with you, they gotta attack your personality, right? So
yeah, and honestly, sometimes it is a personal thing. I mean, I play a lot of pickup basketball all over, you know, the area and in cities and whatnot. Well, I don't now that much, but I did before everything got shut down. And sometimes you see the kid who's constantly getting in fights with people, like physically or just arguing. You find out about like their home lives, and they come from a broken home. They come from, you know, their dad was abusive. Maybe their dad's not even around. You know, maybe their mom was a drug addict or whatever it may be. And you realize like, okay, this is like, I'm taking this personally as in like, this is disrespect towards me, or this is anger towards me. But the truth is there's just anger in him, and I just happen to be what's in the way, you know, and I just happen to be the target for today, but it's an internal issue. And I kind of look at everything like that, you know, same thing with online. I'm like, I don't know who this person is. Maybe if I sat down and actually talked to them and they weren't behind a screen, they might be much more reasonable. Maybe they wouldn't be, you know, jumping to conclusions and whatnot. I've been called. I've never once had a guest on to talk about QAnon, and I've been called a QAnon follower a billion times, and I'm just like, how? I'm like, I've never even like, but it shows that like it's just like you said, it's in many cases it's just somebody getting personal or trying to throw things like that at you to label you because they don't have an argument. Like I'll disagree with people all day. I love my ideas being challenged, because if I struggle to verbalize how I feel on something, that means maybe I should think this out better, or maybe my stance on it isn't the right stance, you know? So my ideas are constantly changing, and I'm not married to anything, you know, even what a lot of stuff that you asked me today, like even on some of the current event stuff we discussed, like, okay, do you agree that this is correct? And I'm like, yeah, right now, but I'm open to hearing somebody from another perspective, as long as they're open to, you know, having their ideas challenged too, not just challenging ideas, but having and that's the biggest problem, is everybody's willing to challenge other people's ideas. The second you challenge their ideas, they get defensive, and that what causes basically a non-productive conversation.
The ones that get me are the comments that are just so unbelievably stupid that you feel obligated for humanity's sake to argue back with them. I got a comment from some dipshit Antifa girl on Twitter this weekend that was like, dude, what are you talking about? Antifa is just an idea. And I was like, okay, here we go. So I will get drawn into those fights from time to time.
Hey, Charlie, you know that was actually Greg's second account, right? Greg Palast. Just kidding, Greg. I love you. I love you. Oh, come on again. Hope never, but hopefully.
But those are fun. Those aren't personal. Those are just like, you know.
Greg's actually another OG. You know, he's another guy who he's been around. If you like some of his old documentaries, you know, Vulture, you know, about vulture funds and you know, the best money or the best democracy money can buy. Like, he really has been doing it for a long time. So I mean, obviously, I'm kidding.
Yeah, he's a legit guy. He's done a lot of great work. I mean, it just look, but like anybody, my where I stand politically has changed over the years, you know, and that's fine. That's allowed, as long as you anchor it in some form of reality and you're able to sort of express why you feel the way you feel, or why you feel like you've changed, or maybe even the parties have. The parties have shifted in one direction. You may stay the same in your thoughts, but now be labeled as alt-right or something, and you're like,
that's a very good point. Yeah.
You can get branded. You can rebrand yourself. Obviously, you can think differently, but you can also be rebranded because the parties go different directions and leave you kind of somewhere in the middle. And
I try to always say, dig for yourself. Here's the information. This is what I'm talking about. I don't need to tell you. I did my own research too. I'm just like another person. Just go look it up. If you think I'm wrong, that's fine. You know, I'm okay with that, and you can tell me. But most people, you know, this is all new, but it's amazing. And I'm telling you guys, the women are so mean. Like, the women on the left that are attacking Megan and me and Nancy and Monica, you should see. So, like, it's horrible, right?
It's horrible. It's evil. It's atrocious behavior. I've never, ever, I couldn't even imagine like that. And I look like my peers. It's just vile. That's all. Like, it's just wicked vileness. And it blows my mind. Like, some of the things that come out of these mouths, I'm just like, are you like a human being looking at me and like, this is happening? This is happening. Like, it's mind blowing.
I used to think that the left was compassionate, or at least they used to portray themselves like that. Yeah. And I'm not left or right. I'm just trying to be as objective as I can. And I think, you know, I know the right always goes, oh, the left is unhinged, but it's like the left is unhinged. Like a disproportionate amount of them are out of their fucking minds, it seems like. And it's hard to have an argument or a conversation against somebody that's flipping out on you, but you just wonder, like, what is it? Are you like, what's going to happen to you if Donald Trump wins again? Have you considered the possibility? I mean, there's going to be people that have to be institutionalized after this. Like, we saw, you know, I've got in my intro to my show, the screaming lady going, ah, you know, that to me, because to me, that's hilarious. But But what happens if he wins again? Like, have we, I mean, we're kind of joking about this, and I think there's a very good chance he will, especially if you go by the amount of enthusiasm that Trump has behind him, whereas Biden has zero. You got to assume that he's in the ball game despite what all the polls say. But what's the left actually going to do if he wins again and they realize they have 4 more years? Are their heads going to metaphorically explode on us? Is it going to get worse? Are the attacks against you guys going to increase, or are these people just going to go suck their thumb in a corner because they've short-circuited their little soy-fed brains or something? Like, what is this going to look like?
I think a big problem too with all this is the fact that, like, you know, they say that, like that old quote, like when you're young, if you don't have a heart, no, if you're not a liberal, you don't have a heart. When you're old, if you're not a conservative, you don't have a brain. Like, you're right, Charlie. Like, the left was known to be the compassionate, the ones that were tolerable of so many different types of people.
Classical liberals,
yeah,
libertarians.
Like, exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. And I think the thing about young people is they have much more time on their hands than people on the right who are going to work, taking care of their kids. So you take all these brainwashed young people, because let's be honest, the universities it's not a place for ideas, for sharing ideas or exploring ideas. It's a place to force feed you their ideas. And so what happens is you get all these very passionate young people who are misguided or looking for answers, and then somebody force feeds them their philosophy that seems to make sense, but they don't get the other side of the argument. So because they don't get the other side of the argument that they do get makes perfect sense to them. You know, they don't, because they ban anybody who's speaking who might have different ideas or whatever. Then because of all that, you get these really passionate, lot of time on their hands, young people with a lot of energy who are going to make the most noise. And really that's why it seems like their voice, and in a way, almost why they're more threatening, right? Because a lot of people who are on the right, they're not out in the streets until midnight because they have to wake up the next day for work.
Right. Also, they're being manipulated by like $15 an hour to go do X. And it is, when you're, but if you look at all the pictures, there's something very wrong with how similar all these people look. Like, there's a lot of juvenile halls and all this, but all these people look very similar to all the like false flag shooters and everything. All I'm saying is that they've dumbed down our kids so much that it's like, no, they're fine being fed. And then they'll go out there and they don't think like the other guy has a family at home, or the other, I saw it begin with Occupy Wall Street, and it's just evolved since then. But the people that the sad part is that what I'm saying is the same people that are, looking to, I believe, to take away our sovereignty, are using these people. And, these Antifa and Black Lives Matter only have power now when they're needed. And then they're not going to have anything. And then, they have all these arrest records and everything. I mean, the DA can keep letting them out, but they're ruining these kids' lives. Most of them look like they're in their 20s. They're still having records, So to me, it's like incredibly sad that there's a generation of kids that got totally caught up in this nonsense. But like all we can do is pray.
University, like you said, because like in 2016 at a New York Jesuit university, they actually offered counseling when Trump won to all the students. And we parents received emails that, if you're a student, if your son or daughter is upset, there's counseling set up. And they had weeks of counseling, and they didn't have to go to class if they were extremely upset. And I heard
they'll be in their safe spaces.
Right. And then they were dragging the flag on the floor in the cafeteria. And I was just like, are you kidding me? I mean, my sons one of them was on track team, so he loved that part. But my other one was like, universities are horrific. He said, first of all, you go there for the recruitment and it's just a big marketing scam. They think that this is going to get you the job. Like my son, and I was just like, oh, but I just want you to get your degree. That'll be great. You know, and they got scholarships, thank God, but they really negotiated it because, especially at the Jesuit schools, they're not big on scholarships. They negotiated such an amazing thing. I was like, why wouldn't you go? But he's like, the professors don't know, like they don't teach. He goes, I mean, I don't know if anybody's a professor here, but he's like, professors, they couldn't make it in the real world. So they taught in the university. And then they keep teaching, they keep saying how Trump is so horrible and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't be behind him. And they were putting
And they're doctors. They're doctors of philosophy by then. So
And
they
then
get to go and write for think tanks.
Right. And the Jesuits.
How crazy we all are in the real world.
And the Jesuits are really, I mean, they're a little out there. And I hate to say it, you know, it's not like St. Francis and back then and Ignatius. It's kind of separated from there. So I could just imagine what will happen if Trump wins and if the school is closed. Like I just heard Iona College closed because they had 60 new positive cases. So now everything's remote. So what happens if the students at the university are remotely learning? Are they going to counseling remotely?
Yes. And why are they paying 60 grand to still go remotely?
Right.
Shouldn't there be a bargain?
There isn't.
NYU is still charging 70 grand a year for remote.
I think what they really want, I think they just want a contested election, and then they want to have the limbo all the way to the end, you know, when whoever is going to take it stage, and then they just want the chaos, because I believe they're going to do a second wave of financial bailouts now to, you know, Wall Street and everybody else, because, and then they actually have the Banking for All Act. I don't know if you guys have seen that, which is basically everybody's going to have a bank account with the Federal Reserve. And then they got you, you know, when I was down in Acapulco, where I actually met, of course, some of you guys, it was, I talked to a guy called Simon Dixon a couple of years ago, and Simon, he said that, you know, they're going to just let the whole system fall apart. And then they're going to be like, hey, come over here, you know, come over to the FedNow coin, and just, you could lose everything over here in the regular system, but then you can get all your money back if you go to our electronic system and become a full slave.
Right. Well, that's what I'm thinking about New York, that they're trying to destroy it, get everyone out that they possibly can, and then rebuild it as their smart city. And then it'll just be like workers from Amazon, workers from Facebook. Everyone will have their own neighborhood.
Well, those smart cities, Mel's brought it up quite a few times on these shows. If you look into it, it is legitimately scary. I mean, you're talking about having sensors all over a city. They know if you're littering, they can send you a fine in the mail if they know you're littering. I mean, they can keep track of everything. If you're not wearing a mask, if they end up mandating all these. So all these mandates and all these ridiculous rules and regulations, like, it just makes it easier for them to find you and screw you, you know, and that
control you. Control you.
So it's I know it's you know, the on quite a few shows I've heard even other people talk about them, but I'm like, I think people don't understand like how scary it really is if you look into it. But
yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but like
okay.
I've been in telecom for like 21 years. That's actually where I got educated back home in Norway, and like I looked at the 5G white papers. And it's like total totalitarian control that they can implement. They don't talk about that, of course. There's, you know, all the great things that you can do. But then you look at China. I did a great in-depth research on China and then did a presentation at a Red Pill Expo about it. And just the total control that they have with, you know, I look at these AIs and algorithms that they put up on cameras. Like now they have, you know, emotional recognition in schools in China where, you know, like if they see somebody reacting to the teacher and they are not doing what they want, well, now you're going to get a downgrade on your social credit score.
Right.
Customer credits.
They say that they have that already. I'm sorry to interrupt, but they say they have that already in New York City on certain billboards and stuff. That we don't know about, obviously, but that they can track your response to a you know.
It's very simple to integrate its stuff. Like it's all software on top of the current CCTV feeds that we get in. So it's not that like it's impossible here. It's you could just evenly take any CCTV camera out there. It is, you know, now there's privately and publicly. There's, you know, millions of cameras everywhere. Like here in Manitoba, everywhere that I go. And then you could just implement software on top of it. And now we have the software layer with the AI and everything running it. And now you could start to implement that whole, you know, wider range of totalitarian controls.
Yeah,
through that system.
Here, I have a lot of people send me stuff because they know I do this podcast, and I had some random fans send me a link to a bunch of hidden cameras on like power lines. And
of course, you can hack it. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were just like you could see live TV, like people's houses and backyards walking around, and I'm like, anybody can just go into this and see. I'm like, this is
they gotta protect themselves. Like people I put up cameras for people all day long, and they don't understand that they need to really protect themselves with a good password on those cameras, or else they're totally screwed. Or just even like don't have it off grid. Like don't even like, because as soon as you plug it in, either China or South Korea or the US, whoever owns the equipment, is gonna have eavesdropping from their agencies into you.
Well, guys, I know we've been on for a while. Obviously, everybody's always invited back. I love having all you guys back, and I always do my best to try to mix in some new and unusual and interesting people. And I think today we had an awesome conversation. Can we let everybody know if you guys want to, you know, Ed? I mean, I don't want to hear from Ed because he's been talking all night, but
What's up, Ed? What's up? Hey, how's it going, guys? Yeah, glad to be here. Sorry to go pick up kids. I just got back in.
Yeah, how dare you be a good parent and miss the show?
Yeah, you know.
But can you tell everybody, if everybody wants to take turns, let them know if the listeners want to connect with you, any upcoming work, where they can get your podcast shows, anything like that. I guess we can start with whoever wants to go.
I'll do it. My show is Macroaggressions. It's on Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Iconic. And got a new book coming out in a couple of weeks with Jeff Berwick called The Controlled Demolition of the American Empire. And maybe we'll get Jeff to come on here if he's not
definitely
having cocktails. Or even if he is. Whatever.
During this show. I mean, there's no rules. Nancy, you want to go next? You want to let people know?
Yes, Nancy Guberti. That you could find me on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and then I have a podcast, Total Wellness Empowerment and Healthy Living Everyday book. It's all about functional medicine and alternative medicine.
I'm a impulsive woman, Mel Krell. I'm impulsive woman on Twitter. My website is manickinmanhattan.com, and I have a book coming out, Manic in Manhattan. And I love this. I love everyone here. God, if only we could just be the microcosm that is the world. But
that would be fantastic.
That's it.
Yeah.
TruthZilla.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we're TruthZilla or TruthZilla Podcast. We got a YouTube channel. We're on all the podcast players. Follow us at TruthZilla Pod on Twitter, and then TruthZilla on Instagram and Facebook. Yeah, hit us up. We're pretty accessible, and we have a good time. Thank you.
Yes.
And John, you want to?
Yeah, you could find me at theeconomictruth.org. Everything that I do is on there. And then I actually posted in our chat if you guys want to join us, because me and Tim, we have our crazy Discord channel because we went off of Facebook and everywhere else because we know what's coming. So we actually have like 200 something people there now where we talk economics. And I literally post articles every day that people need to know about. And we have some really great conversations on money and economics in there for those of you who are just wanting to, see what's happening in the world on the monetary side. And then, of course, if you want to participate, you're more welcome as well, because we love having, opinions in there. And we got some really fantastic people that are just rocking it in there. And we're changing communities around the world with that chat. Literally.
Yeah. Well, we have a Union of the Unwanted Telegram also. I'll send you the link to that. Everybody who has ever been on the show gets to join, and it just keeps getting bigger. And people really, really enjoy these shows. I mean, I'm getting so much positive feedback. People are excited about this. I think the idea of bringing interesting people together and just, I never know how to start these things. And I know like all I have to do is get it started, and then it just kind of goes on its own. which is why I always suck in the beginning of, because I'm like, well, who do I talk to? What do I say? But I know once it gets going, it's just like, and people are really enjoying just being exposed to different people. I mean, there's been so many people who are like, I didn't know about these guys. I didn't know about that guy. I didn't know about, you know, and it's happening for us too, the people who are the guests on the show too. So people are being exposed to a bunch of really fun and interesting people. And I mean, we're all in this battle together, regardless what different opinions we might. I said it too in the chat that I'm going to rant for 20 minutes, even though I'm trying to wind this down, and I'm doing it. I caught myself like, Ricky, shut up. But anyways, you guys hear me talk all the time. But thanks again, guys. I really appreciate it. I'll let you know when the next one is, and hopefully some of you guys, if not all you guys, can join us. And I'll be sending you the links to the video and audio to share anywhere you want. It's all open source, so share it anywhere you want, post it anywhere you want, and hopefully some people on the show connect like they do after every show. Thanks,
Ricky. I mean, you've put together everyone here. You know, the good part about your show is everyone, you know, everyone's a good person. You know, these are all good people.
He's the social chairman.
You know,
of the fraternity.
Yeah, but you know, you really weeded out like people that really do care. You know, and passionate and different personalities. But you know, everyone here is that shows up. It's a good person who has something to share that matters. Really
I mean, I do it in my personal life. It's funny because my friends will say, they're like, oh, if they're a friend of Ricky, they have to be halfway decent. And if every once in a while somebody will sneak in, I'm like, he seems normal. And then you're like, what happened to Joe? I'm like, oh, fuck Joe. Joe's crazy. He's never coming out with this again. You know, so you know,
I think it's important that all this is going out on a bunch of other platforms too. That like, you know, Ripple Effect podcast, Ricky Varandas, the man behind this thing. Like, you guys go support Ripple Effect big time, man. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, it was you know, we're all a part of this. It's been help from, you know, from Charlie, Sam. I mean, I know, you know, having those guys, and then obviously Mike, who's usually with us from the OBDM podcast. You know, you know, everybody just has been a huge contributor of all this. You know, we're all a part of it. I mean, everybody who joins the conversation is equally as important as everybody else. So it's like we're all a part of this, and I couldn't do it without you guys coming on, because then I'd be talking to myself. So so thanks.
Thank you so much. That was such a pleasure.
Everyone here was awesome. Really, really amazing.
Thank you, everyone. Bye,
Thanks, guys. Hey, have a great night. Keep in touch. Take care.
Yeah, have a good night.
Later.